I don't know.
The Planning Commission meeting will be starting shortly. Thank you.
On.
Yeah.
We had an issue last,
Okay.
and then when it's not,
Oh,
there you go.
Thank you for doing that. Okay, thank you. We are ready to start the Planning Commission meeting.
No, they came to see our new city attorney, assistant city attorney.
Call to order the Planning Commission study session of May 21st, 2025. Please rise for the national anthem. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for statement of values.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and the will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interests of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so that we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs above all, before all.
Thank you. You may be seated. We're actually beginning with a study session today.
We will do roll call.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bhatnagar is not in the chambers at the moment. Commissioner Biagini,
Here.
Commissioner Chair Kuru,
Here.
Commissioner Wang is not in the council chambers yet. Commissioner Buza? Present. Commissioner Salame?
Here.
Commissioner Crutchlow?
Here.
Thank you.
So I believe we can
Yes.
redo the roll after we're finished with the study session.
Yeah,
since
yeah,
that's
we will be
part of
doing
the
it again, yes.
meeting. All right, thank you. First item of studies, presenters from David Powers and Associates will provide information on the commission on California or CEQA. And study session can be presented by the staff at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me the time to speak to you about CEQA, and thank you to Leslie for inviting me to do this. I'm going to give an overview of, well, let's just get into it. So what CEQA is, some key concepts about it, the different levels of environmental review that you typically see, how we deal with public comments, some of the more complex items on EIRs, finding statements of override consideration, and what to look for when you're reviewing environmental documents. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions if anybody has any. So just real quick, for those of you that don't know, CEQA was enacted in 1970, and it requires state and local agencies to identify significant environmental impacts of their actions and to avoid or mitigate those impacts. The actual language in the law says if feasible, but I put a star next to this because I say if possible, because it's rarely infeasible. The mitigation is rarely infeasible. It's usually not possible if it's too expensive, but there's very few things that limit mitigation implementation. So the purpose is to provide objective information of the consequences of a proposed discretionary action. CEQA only applies to discretionary projects, from the decision makers who will be reviewing and considering the project. It's also to provide the public and any applicable regulatory agencies the ability to participate in the decision-making process and to comment on the process and the project if they so choose. So we evaluate the change between the existing condition and the proposed project. We seek to reduce or avoid the environmental effects of a project if possible. And CEQA does allow for approval of beneficial projects even when the impacts are significant and unavoidable. So the first key concept I want to talk about is the baseline, and this is really critical, and I think this is something that people have a lot of questions about. So the baseline is, what is the condition that we analyze? What is the start condition, and then we analyze the project from there. So it's most often the existing condition. There are rare circumstances where it can be a past or a future condition, but those rarely occur, so I'm not going to really touch on those. I think primarily what you see is existing conditions. Something important to understand is that the baseline is frozen at a certain point in time. And so I know we've had questions about, well, since this started, such and such happened, or, this other project happened, we can't keep chasing a baseline, so it has to become frozen at one point. So for an initial study, that's at the time we start the initial study process. For an EIR, it's when we circulate the notice of preparation. And then it's really critical to understand the change resulting from the project. So that's why the baseline is so critical, because we're measuring that difference between the baseline, the existing condition, and the project effect. The next major concept is thresholds, and those are the standards in which the impacts are measured. I'm sure you guys are well aware of these. They should be agency-specific, but they're not always. Often agencies use the CEQA checklist rather than adopting their own standards. They can come from outside of CEQA as well. There's a lot of different regulatory agencies that establish thresholds and guidelines that different jurisdictions choose to follow. And how they're determined is based on how the city wants to implement their own policies in general plan and municipal codes. So sometimes the municipal codes have quantifiable thresholds in there that we can pull from. Sometimes the general plans do. Sometimes they'll, I'm sure you're all familiar with it used to be BACMed, now it's just the Air Board. They have thresholds for air quality emissions, and almost every jurisdiction in the Bay Area relies on those. They don't have their own because they are the oversight agency for that. So it's really up to the city planning staff to determine where they're going to get their thresholds from and how they're going to implement those. There it is. Okay. So when we look at thresholds, it really is a line in the sand. And if you're above it, you have an impact. If you're below it, you don't. It's as simple as that. If you hit the threshold spot on, we're going to call that an impact as well. So the proposed action has an effect. It's over the threshold. When you have to mitigate for that, you're only mitigating to the threshold. There is no requirement to mitigate below the threshold. And you never have to mitigate to zero. So that's what this picture is representing here, is that target is just to get below the threshold and nothing else. It's not where everybody wants to be with a project for certain, but that's what's required by law. So once we have an impact, we have to deal with mitigation. And this is basically just a breakdown of what types of mitigation you may see. The preferred one is avoidance, of course, which is where you avoid the impact altogether. The second is to minimize, which you limit the degree of the impact. Rectify by repairing, rehabilitating, restoring. This can be restoration of biological resources. This can be, restoration of a historic building, things like that. Reduce or eliminate impacts over time through preservation and maintenance. And then compensation, either providing, a substitution like, I know you guys have seen it on some of your projects where maybe somebody's taking out some riparian habitat and they have to replace it somewhere else, right? So that's a compensation. You may also occasionally see mitigation calling for the payment of fees. This is very tricky because the law is very clear and the courts have been very clear about when fees are mitigation and when they're not. And it's a very limited scope of when fees are actually are considered mitigation for an impact. Some examples are, I know Santa Clara is not part of the habitat plan. The other cities in the area are, but if you are part of the habitat plan and the developer pays fees into the plan, that can be mitigation for their impacts to biological resources. If the city has a adopted CIP program and you have a project that has already been fully designed, there's a funding mechanism behind it, it has its own CEQA clearance, the developer can pay into that program as well, and that's mitigation. If it hasn't gone through CEQA, if it's not fully fleshed out, if there's no funding mechanism, payment of fees is never mitigation under CEQA. It doesn't mean you can't ask for it, but it doesn't mitigate the effect.
Can I ask a quick
Yes.
question in context? You said that if it is exactly the same as the threshold, it's considered an impact, but you're not required to mitigate below the threshold.
Right.
So how do you have both the threshold and they're not the same thing?
Yeah, so we can't, let me think of a good example. So if you look at I shouldn't say it, sorry, Air District, still trying to wrap my head around the change after all these years. So the Air District threshold for toxic air contaminants is 10 cancer cases per million. If you are at 9.99, technically you're below. If you're at 10, then you have an impact. But if you go above that, or when you have to mitigate, actually if you're at 10, then you would have to get just below it. I mean, you have to, okay, thank you. I see your point. Okay, so get a 10th below it and then you're good.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. That makes better sense. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for correcting me, sorry. So there's different ways to mitigate. Most often you'll just see the mitigation measures listed in the project. Sometimes project applicants will take the step of redesigning their project, working with city staff. That is a great option, and often is done to avoid an EIR. But very often, they can be very stubborn and don't want to change anything. And so that's where the mitigation and the conditions of approval come in to make sure that they do what they need to do. So when looking at mitigation, it needs to be written really well. There's a lot of criteria that need to go into it. It can't just say, we're going to do a study, or we're going to fix this, but not really detail how. It needs to be very detailed, or there's no way for the city to enforce it. So we need to clearly state what the required action or level of performance is to mitigate. Whenever possible, it has to be objectively measurable and enforceable. You have to explain how the measure would mitigate. You have to state the conclusion of the effect after the mitigation. I'm sure you've seen this in documents where, again, if we have an air quality impact and for, say, construction, and it reduces the cancer risk, then at the bottom of that impact and mitigation discussion, it should tell you what the level of emissions will be after mitigation is implemented, right? It needs to tell you that. Substantial evidence must support the determination. You can't just say it's less than significant because we think it is. And there has to be a nexus between mitigation and an identified impact. If there's no impact, there's no feasible pathway to require mitigation for a project. So you need one to have the other. Do you have a question about that? Okay, please.
Hold on. So if there's no impact, there's no mitigation, what that sounds like to me is, did you need mitigation anyway?
No. But I understand your confusion, because
Yeah.
there are occasions where, I'm not saying this chamber, but we work all over the Bay Area. So there have been instances where decision makers have tried to force mitigation on a project when there is no impact. So we just like to be really clear that there has to be a nexus to require mitigation. You can always require a condition of approval, but you can't have mitigation unless there's an impact. So just wanted to emphasize that.
So you could say compensation if you, no, I guess not. All right, never mind.
No. Another important concept with mitigation, and it has to be proportional to the size of the impact, right? You can't ask a project to mitigate an effect that already exists before their project is put in place. And mitigation must be within the ability of the lead agency to implement. If anyone remembers back when we used to look at level of service for traffic instead of VMT as we do nowadays, we would often run into issues because we would impact intersections outside the city's jurisdiction. And we would identify mitigation, but the city doesn't have control over enforcing that mitigation. So we would have to call it significant and unavoidable unless the other agency was brought in and they agreed to it. So it always has to be within the city's purview to implement. It needs to be linked to an action. We try to do this whenever possible to link mitigation to permits, because there's no other way really for city staff to confirm. There's no other mechanism for them to confirm that mitigation has actually been implemented, unless there's an action associated with that, like, okay, show me that you've planted your new trees, you've improved your sidewalk, and then I'm going to give you an occupancy permit, something like that, right? There always has to be a link, if at all possible.
So does that mean you have to, when you create, here's the impact, here's the mitigation, and here's how we're going to measure it in order to say you have so it has to be quantifiable?
Right, right. So when you're reading a document, if you're not seeing that, that's a red flag, right? Because staff needs to be able to implement the mitigation, or there's no point in having it in the first place. As we talked about, fees are only mitigation under specific circumstances, like the CIP improvement. School impact fees is another good example, right? But that's mandated by law. That's nothing that the city controls. Mitigation cannot just be to do another study. Sometimes you will see mitigation that does include, additional reporting or analysis, but that can't be the only part of the mitigation. There has to be additional steps there to say, okay, if we do this study and we find this, then we do this. It has to follow all the way through to an endpoint and a goal, a measurable goal. So just saying another study is not sufficient. And mitigation can never be deferred. We have to be really careful about that. The deferral is not allowed under CEQA, and you can't just say, well, we'll do something about it later. So you don't normally see some of this stuff. This is kind of old school CEQA problems. You don't really see a lot of this anymore, but just so everybody's on the same page when you're looking at your documents. So there's 3 basic levels of environmental review. The first is an exemption. And we used to do very few of these, but nowadays we're doing a lot more. Part of that is because of the legislature. They're creating a lot more pathways for streamlining of CEQA. And the truth of the matter is that nowadays projects that 10 or 15 years ago would require an EIR nowadays are not that big of a deal because we know so much about how to mitigate the effects. Back when I first started, if you had a 100-unit housing project, it was an EIR. Now we do them with an exemption. So, it's very rare that you're going to have an impact rise to a level where, it's a really big issue. Initial studies, negative declarations or mitigated negative declarations. You don't see these as much anymore. Only because, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but there's something called the fair argument standards, so we'll talk about that. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, the environmental impact reports.
Are you open to questions as we go?
Sure.
Okay, good. How do we put in place review of mitigations that are not possible at the time that the project's being proposed, like equipment that will generate noise is not delivered yet, so it's not measurable? It's estimated, I assume. And
It is
therefore,
estimated.
you would need some way to verify that when it is installed, that the noise standards were met.
Right.
So I assume the city can impose penalties of some sort. Is that common? Is that marked out in the permits?
Yes, so typically how we would address that is we would identify a construction management plan that would outline the steps that the construction manager or the applicant would have to go through with the city staff to prove that they've met the criteria for, mufflers and noise suppression devices and, clean air equipment and different things like that. And then the city will go and, they have to prove that they're using that equipment. City checks it off, and then they get their permit to proceed to the next step.
Yeah.
A long-term noise
I was
impacts.
asking about both, but
Okay.
primarily it would be things that are accumulative over long periods. Is it fair to require monitoring mechanisms to verify that?
I think it depends on what type of project it is. If you have a land use that's being put in an area that maybe isn't ideal
Yeah.
for it, if housing's creeping up towards your industrial zone or something like that, it may be appropriate to, have a longer timeframe identified where they have to continue to do reporting to the city, year after year for a certain length of time. And they do have to do that for like their TDM plans, right? Typically, there's reporting requirements. So you could do that for other things too. What the recourse would be if they're not meeting those after a certain number of years, I don't know what that would be.
Well, maybe that's something Leslie or one of the staff could comment on, even in the future. But what are the penalties that we impose as a city or as a precursor to approving the project in case they go outside the spec. Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to answer that now?
If you can.
Well, I mean, I can answer, the city has noise thresholds in the zoning code. And so if we went out and measured the noise and they were exceeding those noise thresholds, they would have to take measures to bring the level of noise down to those noise thresholds. So whatever the equipment was, they would have to fix the equipment or install new equipment or put sound blankets around the equipment. Those are some of the measures that uses have taken in recent times to fix noise
Yeah, okay.
issues.
I think
Or
my
else
major
what?
concern was for long-term.
Or else
initiative.
what if they don't, sorry?
Oh, and if they don't, I mean, there's fines that are imposed, but in general, when we've had issues like that, they've been fixed. Businesses have fixed them. No one has paid a fine. They've been fixed.
Yeah, I think more of my concerns were around long-term cumulative uses like water consumption, power consumption, things where we've, as a city, have set a limit, an expectation for the project, and at the end of a year, let's say, it's measurable that they've gone 20, 40, 100% over the
Yeah.
expected limits.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything's modeled based on assumptions, and there's no way that we can accurately predict.
You can have a requirement, though, if it's a
Sure.
limited resource. You can say your instance of your project cannot exceed this amount.
Yes, and many years ago, when we were having really severe drought, there was more like aggressive measures for water usage on projects. Those things tend to ebb and flow depending on whether we have, good years or bad years and things like that. And more often than not, I will say in a lot of jurisdictions, they don't track those things. And some of the things like noise and stuff are only addressed if they become a code enforcement issue.
Yeah.
So it's something for the city to think about if you want to start planning for more long-term, monitoring of your mitigation. It's, something to talk to staff about, and then they can relay that to the consultants and we can figure out how to make that work. Yeah.
Yeah, because projects have no limits if there's no penalties.
Correct. Okay, so what's the scope of the analysis? The analysis has to be proportional to the project, right? You're not going to, well, I'm not going to say you're not going to. You shouldn't see a 200-page document for, a simple 10-unit infill project, right? And the scope is based on the project description, consistency of the project with the land use designations, and the characteristics and location of the site. So you could have a very small project that's in a completely wrong location, and that would probably end up being quite a more substantive document than, if that was located somewhere else. But typically, people put things where they're supposed to go, and then, your analysis should be pretty straightforward. So how we determine what's needed, when do we prepare an EIR? So based on the law, if it can be fairly argued, based on substantial evidence, in the light of the whole record, that a project may have a significant environmental effect, we're going to do an EIR. That's what the law says. Now, in practice, it's a little bit different, but I had mentioned before with initial studies, we have what's called the fair argument standard. And at the time that CEQA was first initiated, this was a good thing because initial studies were pretty bare bones documents. And so they set a very low threshold to trigger an EIR. And what the fair argument standard is that if you have your expert saying one thing and somebody else, and they don't have to be an expert, but they have evidence to say, I believe that the impact is something else, then that's a fair argument to make. And if it went to court, the court would say, go do an EIR. So it's a very low bar. And that's why you're seeing fewer and fewer initial studies, because they're very susceptible to legal challenge. We didn't personally, there was a project, we didn't do it, in Los Gatos many years ago, and it was for an expansion of the Netflix facility. And a traffic report was done by a very reputable traffic firm, and this was while we used level of service. And it showed that there would be no traffic impacts. So the neighbors weren't happy with that. They sued, and they went to the judge and showed them videotapes that they had made of the different intersections and said, look, this is impacting my life. This is a traffic impact. And the judge agreed. So very low bar. Now, I will say that there is legislation creeping its way through Sacramento right now that may do away with the fair argument standard, which would make a lot of us very happy. Because nowadays, if you've had to read an initial study lately, you will know that they're basically an EIR without an alternative section. I mean, they're very robust. So there's really no reason, it's the same level of analysis that we're doing in an EIR. So there's really no reason for an initial study to be held to a different standard at this point. So we'll see where that legislation goes. But for right now, we have the fair argument standard, which complicates life for everybody. So when we're looking at, when the city's, weighing the pros and cons, the developers weighing the pros and cons, again, the fair argument comes into play when you're doing a negative declaration or an addendum to a negative declaration. It applies in both cases. Even if the initial study was approved, nobody challenged it legally, and it's done, and the project comes in for an adjustment, and we do an addendum to it, the addendum's subject to legal challenge as well by the same standard. Substantial evidence, which has a much higher bar, applies to exemptions. So oddly enough, exemptions are more legally defensible than initial studies. It applies to environmental impact reports, all kinds, and addendums to EIRs. Now, the other interesting thing, and it's not in my slides, but I'll mention it, in an EIR is if someone were to come up, the city has their expert, they said, this is our substantial evidence to this conclusion. And someone came and said, we have our own technical expert, and they disagree with that. CEQA allows for disagreement among experts in an EIR, and it doesn't mean that the city's wrong. If the city has shown their work and they can show reasonable cause why they came to the conclusion that they came, it doesn't matter that someone else comes to a different conclusion. So, important note. So, substantial evidence is facts. It's reasonable assumption predicated on facts, and it's expert opinion supported by facts. So when the traffic engineer comes up here and tells you this is what I believe is true based on my modeling data, that's substantial evidence. What it isn't is it isn't an argument. It isn't speculative. It can't be unsubstantiated opinion. If it's clearly inaccurate or erroneous information, and it cannot be a socioeconomic impact that's not linked to a physical effect on the environment. Again, at this time, if you're familiar with NEPA at all, you know that there are, well, it's recently changed. There used to be environmental justice in NEPA. For a long time, there's been people advocating for it to be added to CEQA as well. It is gaining traction, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So we'll have to see about that, but I think it would be a good inclusion to CEQA to have it in there as well. But currently, unless there's some socioeconomic condition that causes physical effect like blight, we can't address it under CEQA. It's not allowed. So an initial study is often, but not always, less expensive and faster. Not by much nowadays, but still. It can't result in any impacts that are significant and avoidable, and it does have that fair argument threshold. An EIR typically takes longer, can cost more, but it can result in a statement of overriding considerations. It has the substantial evidence standard, and it's used for projects where an impact is expected or where people are being cautious. And I put another little asterisk there because the person being cautious is the developer. Right? If a project warrants an initial study, the city typically can't say we want an EIR because there's case law that says you can't require more than is necessary. But a developer can say, I'm concerned about XYZ special interest group, and I'm going to do an EIR to avoid any issues. And that happens very often nowadays, particularly for certain developers that are that special interest groups like to target. They just ask for EIRs no matter what. So it is their decision. So oddly, you see more EIRs sometimes than initial studies, which makes no sense to me, but that's how it plays out.
Another question.
Yes.
Are EIRs and initial studies done in aggregate for simultaneous developments? Say you have 3 large developments concurrently in process. Each one of them is evaluated against current standards prior to the other 2 being built, and therefore doesn't have an impact, but all 3 of them together would. Is there any mechanism to estimate in the impacts of the other 2 projects so that you get a realistic result?
In an EIR, yes. We have a cumulative impact discussion. That's a requirement for an EIR. And we have to look at past, present, and reasonably foreseeable projects. And I'll go over it a little bit more, but there should be a list in your document that tells you which projects we considered. In an initial study, it's very limited, our ability to look at cumulative effects. And in an exemption, there's no opportunity for that. But it's presumed that it's exempt because it's already less than significant in its own right, and so even cumulatively, it should not have an issue. But yeah, an EIR does afford the opportunity for if you have multiple projects going, or say you approved a project a year ago, and based on that analysis, we assume the construction date to start on this date, and we're looking at this project now, we're going to look at how those line up, and then determine if we need to look at overlapping construction or construction of the new project with new sensitive receptors at the previous project location. It depends on the timing, what we know about the timing of the projects. But yes, we definitely look at
This
that.
is going to happen more often with traffic and other resources, because, project 1 could be 9 out of 10, no impact. This one's 9 out of 10, no impact, and this one's 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
When they're all done, that's 27 out of 10. So there
Right.
is an impact, but it's only an impact at the completion of all 3 projects. Individually, they have passed without impact.
Correct.
And there's no, what I'm hearing, and this is a long-term process that we've been going through, is I don't hear any way or process in place to estimate simultaneous projects in a cumulative way for impact. So
Part of it depends on if they're in very close proximity to each other, and they're all on file when like I said, there's that moment in time where we freeze the baseline, right? So if one comes in after, the first one may not necessarily account for the new project because it came in after they started. But the new project would have to account for the one that's already in process.
But do they? Because it hasn't been built yet.
Yes, they do. Because we have to assume that it will be built.
That's reassuring, thank you.
But sorry, go ahead.
Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, but the thresholds are very different for cumulative. They're quite a bit higher, so it's not often that we hit a cumulative threshold. And each project is only responsible for its own contribution to that cumulative effect. So oftentimes, even though they're contributing to a larger impact, their contribution is not considered significant. So there's a twist to it.
And to, again, clarification, if you have one project and you've received another developer's project relatively adjoining, you can't speculate that both are going to happen at the same time, or can you take the cumulative effect there?
Well, we would assume that they would be happening at the same time and look at the cumulative effect of both of them.
You would,
Yes.
even if the other one may not get approved.
Doesn't matter. If it's on file, yeah, then we have to account for it.
So we can take into consideration future projects.
If they're on file, yes. If they're just like, you heard about it in the paper, but there's no.
Nothing in the system.
Right, then no, we can't.
But if it is in the system, even if they're distinct, unique, separate applicants,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Because we actually reach out to the city and say, what are the other projects happening? I mean, typically we have a pretty good idea, but, we don't, there's a lot of consultants, so we don't know everything. And so we reach out to the city and they tell us what the project list is. At the time that we freeze the baseline, they give us that project list.
Got it. Okay,
I
helpful.
have a question.
Yes.
On timing, so if I have a project, I go do an initial study, gets approved, COVID hits, right? And so now I have to hold off on my project. Is there a time limit to how valid those studies are? Like if I can't do anything for 2 years,
Sure. But you've already been approved.
already been approved, like, is that initial study kind of like out the door, or do I have to redo it?
No, as long as you can pull permits from the city, you don't have to do another environmental report.
And it's valid for 5 years?
There's no time limit. So the shelf life of any environmental document is purely based on the circumstances around that site. So, if you're in some place like Saratoga where nothing ever happens, your EIR could have a shelf life of 15 years or more, right? But if you're in downtown San Jose where they've got new projects coming in, every couple of months, your document's not going to last very long because your existing conditions are changing on a regular basis. So it's
What's
a
the
call that the.
threshold? Yeah, what's the threshold? I'm sorry, you're probably going to say it, so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's a judgment call by the planning staff of when a document is no longer viable. Yeah. Another example of that is at Santana Row, the original EIR, we tiered off of that for 15 years, right? Because nothing else was happening out there. And now we do a new EIR like every 2 years. So and probably soon we'll have to do them more frequently than that. So it just depends. It really does depend on the volume of change that's happening in that location during that time. So, but if you've already been approved, your CEQA's been approved, and particularly if you have a development agreement that's active, then you don't have to go back and refresh your CEQA. But if everything kind of fell by the wayside and you didn't have that development agreement in place and it's been like 5 years, the city might want you to jazz it up a little bit. So. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit already, but what to do, why do an EIR if an initial study is warranted? They afford more legal protection. That's the primary one. They're not subject to the fair argument standard. And then again, developers are concerned about legal challenges, particularly from special interest groups, who I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point. So there's different types of EIRs. I'm sure you've seen a variety, particularly in Santa Clara nowadays, because you guys are doing a lot of specific plans. So I'm sure program EIRs are much more familiar to you than maybe they used to be. So program EIR addresses broad policy or planning, right? That's a specific plan. That's the general plan. They do require subsequent environmental review. There's no way to analyze everything at a level of detail that's sufficient for individual development projects. They can address some resource areas at a program level, but it just depends on the size of the project and how much detail we have in the project plan. As an example, the downtown plan for San Jose, we actually did project level traffic for that, and we did a complete operational air quality for that. So projects that come into the downtown in San Jose don't have to do those analyses because they've already been addressed. But all other resource areas couldn't be dialed down to that level, and so that's where the subsequent environmental review comes in.
Sorry, if it's a pre-question, how long is the cumulative impact? Like, what is the shelf, like, what's the deadline for a project to have been completed before it triggers cumulative impact question? And not piecemealing.
Right. So once a project's built, most often it's in the baseline. It's part of the existing condition at that point. So if it's just built and it's not occupied yet, we're going to look at it as, we know it's not in the, we know that traffic's not on the road or anything, so we're going to put it as part of the cumulative. But if it's occupied and operational, then it's part of the
Baseline.
Yeah.
So it's no longer considered cumulative.
Not in the additive of projects, yeah.
Yeah.
So project level EIR, which are the most typical. That's the environmental changes caused by a specific development project. And that includes, planning, construction, and operation. It has to cover the whole breadth of the project. And the courts have stated that the project determines the level of specificity required within an EIR, not the name, right? Just because you label something one way doesn't mean you're going to get the same look every time. But they all have to have the same general content, right? And that's true with initial studies too. Initial studies and EIRs have the exact same resource sections, the exact same analysis, except for EIRs have alternatives and cumulative. That's the only real difference. Everybody's favorite, public comments. I actually enjoy them, but I don't know that everybody does. There is a formal process under CEQA with an EIR for the public to provide written comments. People also provide written comments on initial studies. We're not obligated by law to provide written responses to those, but we do. CEQA only requires responses to comments specifically addressing the environmental analysis. Non-CEQA comments are typically addressed, but we can just say comment noted. But we don't like to do that because if people are taking the time to comment, then there's a concern or a care, right? And we feel that our job is to educate everybody. And so if we can take an opportunity to provide a little bit of information to help people better understand what's happening, we'll do that, even if it's not a CEQA-oriented comment. So you'll see these responses to comments that can be quite lengthy, right? Because we get into a lot of different things. But this is really kind of the backbone of CEQA, is it being a public process, right? Everybody gets to participate in what's going to be happening in their city. We also, in addition to the formal public comment periods where we take written comments, which typically always come in at the last minute. It'd be nice if they came in over the 45 days or the 20 days, but they always come in at like 5 o'clock the last day. As you know very well, they come in at hearings too. And if at all possible, they should be addressed on the spot, right? That's why staff's here. That's why they ask us to be here, so we can help respond to those if necessary. I can relay that during the 49ers project, we took public comment, and then we took a recess, and I powwowed with planning staff in the back room, and we wrote down responses, and we came back and we read responses to every comment we received into the public record that evening. So, that's a different level of project than what you're normally seeing, but it's important, right? Not only for the public to understand, but also so that you have a complete and legally defensible public record, right? If something were to happen. If a comment cannot be addressed without additional research or review, continue it. Right? Developers don't like it. They get cranky. They complain they're going to lose the project site. It's going to cost them too much money. I get it. I appreciate it. But you got to trust the process, right? And do the process correctly. So if you really get hung up on something, it's not the end of the world to continue it. So, and then late hits. These are the ones we don't like. These are the comments that don't come in on the last day of the comment period. They come in at 5 o'clock the day of the hearing. They happen. There's no way to preclude them in CEQA without limiting the public involvement in the process. So it's just something we have to deal with. Technically, no response is required, but it is best for us to respond because, again, as part of that public record, and if there was a lawsuit, there's something about exhausting all administrative remedies. So we have to show that every time these people have commented, we've responded to them and shown good faith by the city to, address all of their concerns. And then just read the responses into the record at the hearing, whether that's staff or the consultants. But it is very important to address comments whenever they're coming in. So findings, statements of overriding consideration.
Can I ask a question on, so during the public comment is when we do all the other regulatory agencies' feedback as well?
Yes.
And in the specific question for the Native Indian tribe consultation, say we've given, and it's a 30-day period,
Yes,
So we've given the notice, they have to respond to us within 30 days.
correct.
They have come, they've said, yes, we have some concerns. What's the second deadline?
There is no second deadline.
That's a very interesting,
It is very interesting.
Conundrum.
So the city sends out the letters for tribal consultation. And if a tribe says, yes, we want to consult, which they very often do, then the city initiates that process. And they do have to respond within that 30-day window. Sometimes they don't, and then they write comment letters saying, hey, I have comments, and it's like, well, okay, but, you didn't follow process. Once the city enters into consultation with the tribe, it usually goes pretty smoothly. But if it doesn't, and at some point it's been dragging and dragging and we're not getting anywhere, the city has the authority to say we're done. But they really do have to put in best faith effort to try to resolve the issues. And then, at some point they just have to say, we're going to pack up and move it along.
and what's the ramification from an applicant standpoint? Are there no, like we have, if you don't give feedback within a certain period of time, even 45 days from a discretionary permit, that permit application can be considered complete. So it doesn't apply, that same provision does not apply when a tribal consultation happens?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So they can withhold an application? Okay, good to know.
Only until the city has deemed that there's no benefit to continuing the consultation. But they have to be able to document that that's true.
Okay. But the applicant's literally at the
No,
mercy of the city to make that call.
yes, but rarely does it happen. I will say that the tribes that we deal with in the South Bay, there's a very smooth process that we have now with them, and we pretty much already know what they want. Santa Clara is far more sensitive than a lot of other jurisdictions, and we really haven't run into any problems. The tribes are very reasonable for the most part, so.
Okay.
Is there court precedence for what is considered, you did your due diligence and such?
No, not really.
So it's never gone to court?
Not that I'm aware of. So the one thing I will note about the tribal consultation, this has come up a couple of times on projects that my firm has been involved with, going back to the fees cannot be mitigation. We've had some instances where tribes have asked for fee compensation, right, to mitigate an effect. And that's not mitigation. So just be careful if you see that in a document. I don't think you would because Leslie wouldn't
So
allow it.
in lieu
but-
fees is not a mitigation?
I'm sorry?
In lieu fees. We've done that for
It depends on what it is.
trees, we've done that for, we've done it in lieu fees.
Most jurisdictions have removed in lieu fees from their tree ordinances as mitigation. Yeah. But, I mean, again, if there's, please.
I was just say, if I may, briefly, there is a very recent case that deals with tribal mitigations, and I'm happy to send that out if
Yeah.
you are interested in it.
Yeah, I know of an applicant right now who's struggling because
Oh,
of
okay.
the second consultation response just not being there. And the
Sure.
timeline is sticking because there's a second addendum
Yeah. Oh,
to
okay.
the original CEQA document.
Yeah.
So they're already losing time
Yes.
significantly and cost to the applicant. No. I'd be having a different conversation. It'd be conflict of interest. But I am curious of in lieu fees because we have done for riparians, we have some of those impacts being mitigated.
Again, if there's a specific program set up, then there are ways that it can work.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's in the policy basis.
Right.
That enables that kind of a.
Yeah. You can't just
Upfront.
say, oh, write the city a check and we don't know what we're going to do with the money. That's not mitigation.
Yeah.
It might be nice for the city, but it's
We
not
have
mitigation.
wetland and riparian in county.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have an EIR and it has a significant unavoidable impact, you're going to make findings. I'm sure you guys have all read these before, the written statements that document the environmental effects of the proposed project. And then you're going to have a statement of overriding consideration, which is how the city is going to explain why the benefits of the project outweigh the impact that it's going to cause. It has to be supported by substantial evidence. We need the money is not going to survive the courts. You have to have more reason. That can be a reason, but it can't be the only reason. Now, if it's money and public benefits and all kinds of other lovely things, and it's going to generate a ton of jobs, like these are the things that you want to tout, right? It can't just be that we need, our general fund is low. And then, just list as many reasons as make sense. Even though you only need one to support the determination, more is better. So for approvals, that's the decision made by the lead agency that considers the environmental impacts. Approval of the secret document and approval of the project should be taken as separate actions. And I will say Santa Clara is one of only a few cities that actually do this. It's very disturbing to me that other cities don't. They lump everything together and it's a big mess. Because the CEQA document's not the project. They're two completely different things and they needed to be treated as such. To approve the CEQA document, the decision makers must determine that the analysis is adequate. That's the only question. Does it make sense? Do you believe it? If you do, approve it. Simple as that. The CEQA document can be approved even if the project's not, but not the other way around, right? You got to have an approved CEQA document or you can't approve the project. But we like to have things split up for the very reason that if you don't approve the CEQA, even if you deny the project, if you don't approve the CEQA, all of that work, all of the technical effort that goes into it, it disappears. It doesn't exist. If it's approved and someone comes in later with a modified project or a new project, we can utilize that data. It's still good information for us, but it has to be approved in order for us to be able to do that. So may I use a Santa Clara example? Okay. I don't want to upset anybody, but when we first did the El Camino specific plan, it went to council and they denied the project. Well, they didn't take action on it. They also didn't certify the EIR. And so we're looking at it again now, and that EIR is not valuable to us in any way, shape, or form. So all the work that the city staff put into it, all the work we put in, all the money that the city spent on it, just kind of fell by the wayside. So it's really critical, if you feel that the analysis is adequate, to go ahead and approve that document, even if you don't want the project. You can deny the project, that's fine. But there's value to having the environmental approved no matter what. Only if you agree with it. If you think it's not sufficient, yeah, then don't approve it. But they really do need to be considered independently. Okay, so some pitfalls to watch out for. More's not better, right? We don't get paid by the word. You guys don't want to read a lot of stuff. So the intent is just to, identify those impacts and find out ways to avoid or minimize that damage. Speculative analysis is not allowed, so we got to be really careful about that. The analysis should focus only on the thresholds. Adequate but not exhaustive study. It just needs to hit the benchmark, right? We don't have to shoot for the moon. Disclosure is the complete and sole purpose of CEQA, so that's what we're all about. Don't ask for analyses not covered by CEQA. Primarily economics, can't discuss it. There's actually a guideline in there that says can't do it. And subjects for which there's no clear environmental effect or established thresholds. If there's no threshold, we have nothing to compare an impact to. So we have to have a threshold, and it has to be a physical effect on the environment for us to discuss it. And don't assume that analysis would find a different conclusion if we did an EIR instead of an initial study. I guarantee that'll never happen. Regardless of what level of environmental review we do, the conclusion should always be the same. And the thresholds are the same for every level of environmental review. So what's required for CEQA clearance? We're almost done. CEQA clearance is based on consistency with applicable city policies and the development assumptions in the general plan. The level of review required should be commensurate with the level of project detail that's available. If there's insufficient detail, maybe it's going to require subsequent environmental review at a later date, right? We can only analyze the information that we're given. If project details are unknown at the time of the review but necessary for permits, conditions of approval should be required to ensure that the city gets all the information that they need. Conditions of approval, like mitigation, should be linked to specific actions whenever necessary to ensure that they're complied with. So when you're reading the documents and wanting to make sure that they're adequate, you want to look for clearly written and complete project descriptions. Everything in the analysis is based on that project description. And it shouldn't be full of a bunch of fluff, right? If it's not relevant, it shouldn't be in there. Clearly written analysis based on substantial evidence. Technical jargon should be limited. This is very difficult to do. And there's more acronyms in a CEQA document than you ever want to learn. But it is the job of the consultant and city staff to try to make these as readable as possible. So if you don't understand something, nobody else will either. And please ask before we get to hearing so we can help clarify anything that you need. I'm always happy to answer questions. As we talked about, mitigation measures need to be measurable and enforceable. You have to have clear conclusions which show the level of impact, particularly after mitigation. Make sure that all the checklist questions have been addressed. Can't skip any of them. And make sure that the analysis is consistent with relevant city policies. Very important. Also important to remember is that no document's perfect. It needs to just be understandable and legally defensible. That's our benchmark. Will it survive legal challenge? When you're reviewing for cumulative analyses, we have to look at the effects of the project when combined with other projects, past, present, and reasonably foreseeable. So that reasonably foreseeable, is it on file, right? And present, is it on file? I will put a caveat to that. If we know that the city's going to drop a specific plan, they've got an RFP out, right, to get a plan together, we may have to consider that depending on the timing. So there are special circumstances, but in most cases, it's got to be on file. An EIR has to include those list of projects. What did we consider in the cumulative analysis? Project does not have a significant cumulative effect just because it adds to an impact. We talked about that a little bit before. And then the EIR should explain the area of impact used for each cumulative resource discussion. This is very important. The EIR should define the geographic area of the cumulative effect. It's going to be different from resource to resource, right? For air quality, it's typically 1,000 feet. For noise, it's maybe 500 feet, right? For cultural resources, it may just be the immediately adjacent parcels. Hazardous materials, it can go out a quarter of a mile or more. Depends on what's happening. So if it's not defined in your document's insufficient. You need to ask the question. When we're looking at alternatives, it has to include a reasonable range, right? If we have an EIR, we have the project, and then we're going to kind of define other ways that the project could work and reduce impacts, right? That's the alternatives. A reasonable range is not defined by CEQA, so it can be whatever you determine it to be. There's no specific number. The only thing that's absolutely mandatory is the no project alternative. Beyond that, it's what is appropriate to the level of the project. So for projects where the developer chooses to do an EIR when one is not required, that's where we find a lot of trouble trying to define an alternative because they don't have a lot of significant effect. So what do you talk about, right? So you may only see two alternatives, maybe a reduced density just to get rid of some construction impacts and the no project. So don't feel it's inadequate just because you don't have a wide variety of alternatives. You really have to gauge it against the project. The EIR should describe the alternatives considered but rejected and the reason why they were rejected. So for example, when we did the 49ers project, I think we had 12 or 15 site locations that we rejected for various reasons, and they're all mapped out and defined in the EIR. So anytime Because you don't want someone to come in and say, well, what about this alternative? Why didn't you look at this? Well, we did, but we rejected it for these reasons, right? So very important to show your work in all cases. San Jose lost a lawsuit for that many years ago when they did their new city hall, actually. Alternatives are not reviewed at the same level of detail as the project, but they must have sufficient information in case you want to choose an alternative. You have to be able to still understand the effect of the alternative. So they have to provide some measurable, analysis, at least comparing it to the project, so you can have a good idea of what the alternative would be. I can say in I'll just say 25 plus, because I don't want to be too specific, but my 25 plus years of doing this, I've had 2 projects adopt an alternative. It never happens. Hardly ever. And in one of those cases, the developer actually said, yeah, let's do the alternative instead. I think it's a better project, so. So the top takeaways from this is just follow the process, right? We all like a clean process. We don't like to create extra work. Mitigation must be measurable. Regardless of the document, it should show its work. You should understand how the consultant and the city came to the conclusion that they came to. If you don't understand it, neither will the public. So we need to have a conversation about that. The key to the impact determination is in the thresholds. It's all about the threshold. Make sure that the project is complete. We have to understand the totality of the project, even if that's, they're going to dig up the road across the street because they got to extend a water line. That needs to be in there. We need to understand that. The record includes the environmental document as well as testimony, so complete public record. Public comment period isn't over until the vote, right? People can comment up until the very end. Substantial evidence in an EIR trumps fair argument any day of the week. And the environmental document is not the project. Very important. So if you have any other questions, I'm more than happy.
Yeah, let's do a round of questions, but we're already late for the main meeting, so let's hopefully keep it pertinent and short.
I got a quick one.
Sure.
One of my favorite ones. Data centers. Told you we weren't getting away from it.
You thought you were getting away from it
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah. Well, it's not for the lawyer. Unfortunately, it's for you, so.
Okay.
But this is one that, CEQA, the whole idea in my mind is protect the environment, understand the impact, mitigate as best as you can. My problem with data centers bring up the fact that you have to say, okay, we're going to use diesel generators and such in the case we don't have power. And we're probably going to run them for at least 72 hours, or be able to, because we don't know how long power is going to be out.
Right.
And it always is based on that individual data center. And let's stop calling it data center. It could be any industry.
Okay.
I need the backup. I'm a hospital. I need to have backup generators going for obvious reasons. But what it does is it looks at it, number one, we're in a valley. The estimate is done based on a model that doesn't look at a valley and the conditions that brings into it. And it also doesn't take into the cumulative effect of all the other ones that you have around there. So, I was watching some of the things you were talking about with cumulative projects and things like that. Why doesn't it sit there and say, hey, look, number one, we're Santa Clara, but there's a ton of data centers or other industry surrounding us, like, let's say within a 25-mile zone. Why isn't that part of the requirement to say, hey, look, the cumulative effect of all these now have gotten to a capacity
Right.
that it's going to wind up really, even though it may be on for 3 days, it's really going to do some damage to people.
That's a really good question. Part of it has to do with the Air District and how they develop their thresholds and standards. Most air quality impacts are not looked at a regional level. They're looked at a very localized level, and so it's hard to interpret, a broader area, and if there's no threshold, again, there's nothing we can really do about it, and if the modeling can't accurately capture it, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Well, that's the other side of the coin. There are models that'll take these things into account,
Okay.
but they're not required that you use them,
Right.
from what I understand. And the fact that all these other industries or these buildings and such have already been approved, we already know from their study how much they're putting out.
Yes.
And so understanding, what the cumulative effect is relatively empirical in my mind.
I would agree. I will say that for air quality in particular, it sometimes takes a long time for new issues to roll around. I mean, we've only been addressing greenhouse gas emissions for maybe 10 years. And when we first started addressing them, we addressed them only as a cumulative effect. It's much different now, right? And each jurisdiction has their own regulations and climate action plans, and we look at it at a very specific, dialed down level. But that didn't happen for a very long time, even though we knew the issue. So it just may take some time for the Air District and to, get on board with how, providing guidance on how we address this at a more regional level. But right now, we just don't have that.
And it would be the Air District that would have to
Yes.
do that. So we can't say, hey, listen, we want to require this.
You could, but then the city would have to find its own technical experts to develop a methodology and prove substantial evidence that your threshold is correct. And that's a lot of work. So,
Okay,
You know.
let's give another commissioner a chance. Priya,
No, I'm good.
all right.
Thank you.
Nancy? And I'll ask my last question.
okay.
Are there mechanisms and standards to fortify an EIR and a CEQA document such that it can't be used by a special interest as a weaponized tool to push their particular agenda? I'm concerned because I'm seeing over the history that I've been here, groups bringing in EIR and CEQA objections
Yeah.
for issues unrelated to the actual EIR and CEQA
Right.
documents. So where's the recourse for the city to fortify the documents to prevent that from being a common occurrence?
I mean, really, the only thing the city can do is ensure that for the resources that we are required to address under CEQA, that, the substantial evidence is there to support it. For anything that doesn't really fall into, the check boxes that we look at, it's within the city's purview to say that's not applicable in this case, and we don't have to address it. I don't know that there's a lot more you can do to bulletproof a document than what we already do. And like I said, there's no way for the legislature to minimize those attacks without taking the public process out of CEQA, which negates the whole purpose of it in the first place. So unfortunately, they've just gotten very savvy about how they use it or weaponize it, and it's a frustration for all of us. But
That's the reason we don't have any more CEQA for large projects like
Some of the
housing.
larger projects, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Elizabeth, were there any public comments or questions? They can.
Let me check here. We do not have any hands raised online. Was there anyone in the chambers who wanted to make comments? No, so we know we don't.
So thank you very much.
thank you.
Great graph.
There's really no motions to be made, it's just thank you. And we
You're
can
welcome.
move on to
Nancy.
the normal meeting.
In the packets I gave you at the very end, my contact information is there. I'm always happy to answer questions if anybody wants to reach out. Please feel free.
I has a question.
I just want to thank you for making that cartoon not as crazy.
That's how it feels, right? I mean,
That's a compliment.
thank you very much. Appreciated being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, staff, for getting us this. Can I use it for my AICP?
So we're missing someone. There he is.
He's coming. There he is.
Yeah. So with the arrival of our final planning commissioner, can we readdress the role?
We do need to call to order for the regular meeting.
Actually, we did that.
That was
out
for
of
this,
order.
that was for the study session.
I know, but I went ahead and we did all the procedures for the regular meeting. I
Well,
noticed
that was for
that
the
after
study
the fact.
session. Okay. It's part of the process, so I will, we have all commissioners present, so I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've been officially started for the full hour, which if we need, okay. We're reopening the stated Planning Commission meeting for May 21st, 2025. Thank you. We do have one more order of process. Secretary Crutchlow, could you please read the commission procedures?
Public hearings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the commission directs all activity during the hearings. All comments shall be addressed to the commission. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent hearing. Applicants will be allotted up to 10 minutes to present and justify proposals. Following the staff presentation of the item, other speakers will be given up to 2 minutes. The applicant is allotted up to 5 minutes for rebuttal of comments. No additional comments will be accepted upon close of public hearing, although the commission reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. Special procedures time limits may be applied to any item as prescribed by the chair. Appeal of commission actions must be filed within 7 calendar days. Chair?
Thank you. Copies of the current agenda, staff reports, and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available from the Planning Division office on the Friday afternoon preceding the meeting and available online. So that moves us into continuances and exceptions. This part of the meeting allows for applicants, members of the public, or interested parties to request an item be continued without hearing, withdrawn, or taken out of order. Are there any requests from applicants or the public or the commission? I believe our first public item was requested to be continued.
That is correct. On the public hearing calendar, item 2, there's a request for continuance.
Okay.
Question, this is be the third time we're continuing this item. What seems to be the problem this time?
There's Leslie. Okay, she can reply to that.
3 times.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. There was a email attached to the continuance request that the applicant had a medical emergency and requested this item be continued to August in order to deal with that medical emergency.
August.
So August, you said?
August.
That is correct, your August meeting.
I just want to make a quick comment on this right now. What we're trying to approve of here is the easement or her fence, that it comes close to the sidewalk.
That is correct.
Well, if you get out here, I'll take a walk with you for a couple blocks, and you're going to see the whole neighborhood, the same thing. So there's a problem here that somebody's being picked on, I think.
Well, let's discuss it at the time.
I will, but I'm just trying to save time. This thing keeps getting on and on and on and on, and you know what is going to end up happening.
Through the chair, if I may, my understanding is that this item is intended to be open the public hearing for it so that it can get continued to a date certain and it does not need to be renoticed.
Right.
It's already, I think, been opened once and continued.
Yep.
So we are simply continuing at this point without closing public hearing. So do I hear a motion to continue? So moved. Okay, thank you. Motion to continue and seconded. To a date certain this time, right?
Yes, to August 13th, please.
Commissioner Biagini made the motion. Who seconded it?
I did.
Commissioner Crutchlow, thank you. Go ahead and cast your vote, please.
I will vote aye. I don't
Yes.
see,
Thank you, and the motion passed. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, consent calendar. right thing, yeah. Commissioner Crutchlow, please read the consent calendar information.
The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted, approved, or adopted by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. If any member of the Planning Commission, staff, the applicant, or a member of the public wishes to comment on a consent calendar item or would like the item to be heard on the regular agenda, make this request now. Items listed on the consent calendar with associated file numbers constitute public hearing items. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion, second.
The motion was made by Commissioner Bouza, seconded by Commissioner Cherukuru to approve the consent calendar.
No. Nancy?
I was second.
I'm okay.
Okay, I will revise that. Thank you.
All right, that moves us on to public presentations. Are there any members of the public that would like to briefly address the commission on the item not on the agenda? On the phone?
There are no hands online.
Yeah,
I
if
see
it's
one
on
hand
the
in the chat.
agenda, then we'll have time to speak about it. If you have something else that's outside of the agenda. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Johnston. My husband and I live on Gonzaga Place in Santa Clara, and we've lived there for 35 years. A home we made for my sons and a home we've worked for. It's all changing now because of SB 9. I'm hoping you're all familiar with it. I discussed it with Ahern. You didn't know about it. Anyway, because of SB 9, we will now have a 2-story duplex looking into our backyard and into our lives. This is called the Home Act. I think it's a joke. It's a money-making bill for the state and the cities that implement it. Planning Commission said they're only doing what the state has approved. I called them, very nice people. Thank you for helping me. This is a neighborhood, though, not a complex of monstrosities. Santa Clara already has plenty of those everywhere. And are those full? No. Are they affordable? No. The Home Act is, my considering, is not a Home Act, it's a house. These are money-making things for the people that are implementing it. The cities can make changes and addendums. I know because I've looked into it a lot. I know way more about SB 9. SB 423, however, is too late for me and the people that live on Creighton and Georgetown and Gonzaga, because I didn't even know about this. Nice. Now with the new bill, I'll know about it, but it's too late. Permits will be made. I can't do anything about it. So I just wanted to let you know that now I will live for a year with construction looking into my backyard. I'll live because they're going to floor it down to nothing, build a 2-story duplex. So that means that 2 families will now move into that. So great. It's a money-making thing. They'll probably charge $3,500 a month for each side. It's not going to be probably even more. So they'll pay off their loan in less than 10 years. This is a wonderful neighborhood. Wonderful neighborhood. We used to be called Killarney Farms. We're not anymore. Now it's all going to be very different. And it's sad. I cried when I found out about it. I literally cried. So I can't change the bill. My alternative is to move or put a tree, a big tree. That's my only alternative. So I just leave you with this. I know my time's up. If this was your backyard, would you want it?
Maybe a good
Thank you.
comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I agree with you, 100%. The only thing you can do about it is the people up in Sacramento,
Yeah.
when next time you vote, make sure you vote the right people that are
I've
there.
emailed them.
And
I've
I feel
contacted
for
the
you, 'cause
Chronicle.
I will be in the same position you would be.
Yeah.
I really don't want that, and I've seen it with my neighbors, and there's nothing that I can do about it. I'm frustrated. I'm very upset about it, too.
Yeah.
So I feel for you. I really do. And it really angers me because I value our city a lot, and I value all our neighbors.
I don't know if
and
you
our
know the
neighborhoods.
area, though. There's 3 dead-end streets, and I just take 5 seconds. And we all know each other, except for this one house. They rarely live there, and it's annoying. But the cities can do changes. Los Altos has an addendum. San Jose has an addendum. Woodside has an addendum.
Saratoga does too.
I mean, it's just, I wish Santa Clara would do it because these neighborhoods are going to be gone. And that's so darn, my value of my home has gone down that I just paid for. So, I mean, I feel, anyway, that's my 2 cents. I can't change the bill, but I hope that in future we can make an addendum. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think what you'll find is there are a couple of study sessions that we've done, and our comments are on record, and you should, maybe with the help of writing to the staff, be able to easily find it and review it, and you'll see that it's not a surprise for us, but it's a disappointment that the public did not have an opportunity to really fully understand the depth of the changes.
Till it happens to us.
Yeah.
It's a disappointment, and it's from the state, and there's other parts of it. I actually have a
Through the
4-story.
chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I may, this is not an agendized item, and just to avoid running afoul of the Brown Act, I recommend
We
not
understand.
having a discussion about it.
But I'm glad we're all passionate about it.
We understand.
Yeah. Sympathetic ears. Anything else? Any other agenda items? On non-agenda items, I'm sorry.
Public, no, we don't have any hands raised
Okay,
and
we're all
nobody
done.
else in the council chambers.
Okay, so we move on to public hearing items. I'll read the items off. We continued the continuance of the action on the variance for the fence. Item number 3, which is our second public hearing item, is an action on conditional use permit to modify existing conditions of approval to allow solid waste and recycling collection from Cecil Avenue for the existing Subaru dealership located at 3225 Stevens Creek Boulevard. And I believe staff is going to have a presentation on it. We've also received, and majority of us have had time to read the after submission document. Thank you.
Could we share the council chamber PC screen again, please? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leslie. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening, public. My name is Alex Tejas, Assistant Planner. I am the project planner for this conditional use permit located at the Stevens Creek Subaru dealership. It's my first time using this clicker, so we'll see how smooth it is. Alrighty, so how the chair already mentioned, the request from the property owner is to modify their existing conditions of approval. So we're looking at modifying conditions P6, P8, P13, P16, and P20 to allow solid waste and recycling to be collected from Cecil Avenue for the existing Subaru dealership. Righty, so just a little, oh, it's not on. Okay, now it's on. Hello. All right. Just a little background on the existing site. So currently the site is about 1.57 acres. It's surrounded by single-family homes on the north, the San Jose city limits on the south, and commercial properties on the east and the west. This property is now zoned in, designated on the general plan, regional commercial, just to by state laws. So both the zoning and the general plan are the same now. Righty, I just wanted to give a little more context. Again, I did mention about all the single-family homes in the north. They do face this property on the Cecil Avenue. And so when this property was first developed, there was a lot of conditions on their operational use of this property to ensure that the neighbors in the north, all the single-family homes are, able to live in harmony with this property. But I do also want to mention that there are commercial properties on the left and the right, and also on the south of this property. And as you can see in my next slide, a little historical context. Well, I guess let me move to the historical context first, just as I mentioned. So we currently have an aerial image of how the site looks today. And I also have an image of how it looked like in 1968, exact, screenshot of that map. As you can see, just how in 1968, Stevens Creek already was developed with a lot of dealerships. You know, if I wish I had a pointer, I would like to show the property on the right. As you see, there's a lot of like vehicle storage back then in 1968 compared to now. That now it's a little more developed, more enclosed. And I think this just to show how this has been something that you know that has been going on for a while, and that's been a use that's been historically been in this corridor. Righty. Now to go back to the scope in the request. So as like I mentioned, we are looking to modify condition P6, P8, P13, P19, and P20. The intent is to allow for the collection of solid waste on site. So currently, based on their conditions of approval, they need to get their trash collected from Stevens Creek Stevens Creek, which is a really major thoroughfare. So we did receive a comment from Mission Trail stating that they do prefer collection from Cecil Avenue due to the fact that it is dangerous for their workers to like waste from Stevens Creek. And they are currently already picking up waste for all the commercial properties on Cecil Avenue. So Subaru dealership is the only one that is not getting their trash picked up on Cecil. All the other dealerships in the future, Lincoln dealership also will get their trash picked up from Cecil. And so that's why I did include on the post-meeting materials the statement that we got from them, just so you can, the commissioners can, and the chair can read it. And this will also be part of public record after the meeting. So now to talk about the proposed track changes, and they are found on the updated revised conditions of approval that was given to you today. We did get some public comments, and we wanted to make it really clear about the track changes. The original track changes found on the staff report weren't too clear, so staff worked today to make sure they were more clear and legible, and I will be discussing them shortly. Righty, so now we're talking about the conditions of approval and the track changes that staff and also the applicant is requesting. So as you can see, everything that's either highlighted or crossed out are things that were the track changes. So we'll start with P6. So originally on the staff report for P6, it originally stated that the track change would have crossed out the section talking about the noise study. Staff went back and with the new revised conditions of approval, we're keeping that condition intact with that portion. We're only just adding the verbiage saying that to facilitate the collection of waste only and to facilitate the collection of waste in the lower part of that condition. Just because it's one of the mitigations, and we would like to be consistent with that statement that originally was when this project was approved. So that's why we're keeping the portion of the conditions of approval that states about the noise study. And then the applicant is well aware about that, and they are okay with that. And next up, we got P8. So P8, originally, the condition stated that all employees should be directed to park on-site, and no employees shall be permitted to park off-site. The track change that it's in front of you is now recommending that employees shall be directed to park within the designated parking stalls on-site. The designated parking stalls shall be sign or stencil employees only. Employees should be strongly discouraged to park off-site. The intent for P8 and the change is just to make enforcement more practical. Our code enforcement officers with this condition could go on site and check the employee parking that should be on the first floor, and actually, you know, to see if we see any vendor cars, then it's easy for the code enforcement to cite them. Versus currently with this condition, there are other commercial properties next to Subaru dealership, so it is really hard to tell if it is a Subaru employee or an employee from the other commercial properties. Then we got P13. So P13 is this solid gate fence located where the future trash enclosure or the trash enclosure is going to be located. So to facilitate the trash pickup, we're just adding the verbiage to trash recycling pickup only, just to facilitate that request from the applicant. Righty, and then we got P19. Just to be consistent with P6, we're also adding the we're crossing out trash and recycling pickup because the original condition stated that no trash or recycling pickup will be allowed to occur on Cecil Avenue. So this will just allow them to have the trash being able to be picked up by Mission Trail. At this time in front of you, we are recommending this to scratch out the oil and other fluid extraction and supply on Cecil Avenue. Currently in enforcement, it's been really, it hasn't been really practical for enforcement to go out there and because it's been hard to tell which truck is for oil or which truck is for just any other miscellaneous stuff. So this is something that staff has recommended to make enforcement easier because it would just be within the business hours. So if we see anything happening outside the business hours, then enforcement can go out there and cite Subaru dealership. Lastly, for P20, it's a standard practice with our noise ordinance to prevent any noise, disturbance to happen any time before 7 a.m. So originally with this permit was approved, entitlement is approved, it was allowed that they were able to, use their equipment starting at 6 a.m. So just to be consistent with our noise ordinance and to ensure that, we don't have anybody getting woken up at 6 a.m., we're making the change, recommending the change for 7 a.m. and that their machines, these power equipment can be operated after 7 a.m., not after 6 a.m. Right, and now I just want to show you the site plan that was provided by the applicant with some red lines that the applicant provided. So with P13, pretty much that's the gate that's marked on red saying the sliding door. And as you can see right next to that on the right side, that's where the trash enclosure will be. And so with P13, it will allow them to be able to open just that sliding door just for the trash to get picked up for Mission Trail, because the Mission Trail trucks, they're not small enough to be able to go inside the actual property and pick up the trash from their enclosure. Right, so it's really important to be consistent with the zoning code. So as mentioned in the staff report, the only way something like this can happen is that the applicant needs to request it from to the original authority that approved this to make the change, but it needs to be done with the findings. So as in quotations are the findings. So based on Santa Clara City Code Chapter 18.150, the approving authority needs to look at the findings that if the circumstances on which the permit or approval was granted have been changed to an extent that one or more of the findings that justify the original approval can no longer be made, and the public health and safety and general welfare require the modification or revocation. So the finding in front of you would be finding D of the 2016 resolution can be made due to the following bullet points. So solid waste and recycling collection restrictions under the Planning Division Conditions 6 and 19 create an unreasonable constraint to the site's waste management. The constraint is unique to the site. A similar development abutting Cecil Avenue has been allowed to get their solid waste and recycling collected from this street for recent projects. And the recent project that this is, pertaining to will be the Lincoln dealership. The Lincoln dealership that got approved after Subaru will be allowed to have their trash picked up from Cecil Avenue, and it's like they have conditions specifically just allowing trash pickup only. And then lastly, to also meet the public health section of this, section of the code, the waste management company Mission Trail operates their collection trucks on Cecil Avenue currently, and modified these conditions will not generate any additional noise or pollution. And Mission Trail has stated that the waste collection on Stevens Creek will pose a safety hazard for their operators and also for the incoming traffic. And then lastly, these conditions are no longer necessary due to the conditions on the ground. As you probably heard, and you probably can see with the attachments, staff and the enforcement has gotten really a lot of calls on this side due to the fact that they're not able to get their trash picked up on Stevens Creek. They've been having to roll their waste to the future site of Lincoln dealership. So with that, due to that, with having these changes and being allowed to have their trash picked up from Cecil on the property, it should clear up a lot of the trash on the sidewalk and mitigate any of these additional noises that are currently occurring on site. Righty, and just with the zoning code, we also, our request needs to be consistent with our general plan. So this request is consistent with the general plan due to how it's, the trash enclosure will now be visible, and it will be off from the public street. So the trash area, as mentioned on the site plan, it is hidden inside their property, so it won't be visible. And plus, they have that solid gate also abutting C-Sale. Next, so there's a policy talking about concentrate through traffic on major streets and encourage traffic distribution that maximizes the efficiency of the existing roadway network. So the key for this one would be the maximizing the efficiency of the existing roadway network. So due to Mission Trail already picking up trash from the commercial properties already existing, they're picking it up through Cecil Avenue. The truck is already going through, and it will go through when Lincoln gets developed, and they will get their trash picked up. So this will just maximize the pickup and make sure it's just one stop for all these commercial properties and ensure there's less noise and everything happening on CISO. Lastly, again, piggyback on the last one, just minimize disruption of traffic flow resulting from the traffic and deliveries, particularly during commuting hours. So on the context of this, just because Mission Trail already has their schedules and their routes, and they're already picking up all the other commercial properties, just with picking up Subarus, it would be the same route, same time, and so there would be more consistency for the neighbors and the residents, and there wouldn't be, and it would reduce all any other problems that the neighbors could face or are facing. Alrighty, next up, we'll talk about public outreach. So following our public outreach policy, a virtual community meeting was held on November 18 of last year. Staff was present in the meeting to hear community feedback, and we recorded the community meeting, and it's attached on our website for the public to view, and then to get the point of view of the applicant for that community meeting. Unfortunately, we did not get any participates, and then unfortunately, but we did record it to make sure that anybody who wasn't able to make it could see the presentation from the applicant. Staff has conducted outreach to the South of Forest Neighborhood Association president. We met with them and to understand their concerns and work with the applicant to remedy them. And this is the big key that staff has been working on with this particular request, is to make sure that, especially with the site and the history, with the public comments, we really do take them in and make changes. So that's why the revised conditions of approval is in front of you guys. It came later today, just because we wanted to take that feedback from the president of the South of Forest Neighborhood Association to make sure the conditions are clear, because this is a legal document, so we want to make sure that everything is clear and the neighborhood is able to live in harmony with this commercial property. And then lastly, just with what is recommended, what is required in our policy, notices were sent out to 500 feet of the project site. As you can see, there's the public here, and the applicant did put the on-site notice on the front on Stevens Creek and on the back on Cecil. And when the staff report was prepared, we did receive one public comment from one of the neighbors in opposition before the agenda was posted. And since then, we've gotten a few other comments after the agenda was posted. Again, lastly, we need to evaluate if for CEQA, for the California Environmental Quality Act. So this proposal, this request is categorically exempt due to Class 5 categorical exemption, which is called minor alterations and land use limitations, which applies to minor alterations in the land use limitations. So because they're requesting changes to the conditions of approval, it does not change the density or the land use. So this exception is applicable. Righty. So staff recommendation is to determine the request is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act based on the guideline section 15305, Class 5 minor alterations and land use limitation, and to adopt a resolution approving the conditional use permit to modify existing conditions of approval, condition P6, P8, P13, P19, and P20. to allow solid waste and recycling to be collected along Cecil Avenue for the existing Subaru dealership, subject to the findings and the revised conditions of approval. Righty, so that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant does have a presentation. I think they should, the applicant is in attendance. I will,
Yeah, please,
Through the chair.
yes.
How many times is the anticipated pickup scheduled by Mission Trail for this?
so, so when we got the, I guess, letter from Mission Trail, they didn't really state exactly how many pickup times, but based on, I guess what I might know, it should be 1 week, but once a week, just when the trash gets picked up for everybody. Yeah, the applicant probably would know too better if it, and
Okay, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Wait a minute, there's questions for staff?
More questions? All right, go ahead.
yeah.
So what's the difference between that they cannot park off-site versus the wording strongly discouraged? I know I heard you before, but I didn't really quite understand what the difference, like, yeah, how does, what's the due to enforcement and such is where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, I think based on our conversation with code enforcement, this change will allow code enforcement more flexibility. I think currently with the existing condition of approval, there's no flexibility. It's really strict and like draconian. It's just like, there's like, it's like no cars from the employees there. With this, it gives the opportunity for enforcement to go on site, check the parking stalls, and then tell them like, hey, your parking stalls are not for your employees, or they're not being used. Now they can give them a finding or a citation versus currently the property owner could say, oh, those are not my employees. Those are the neighbor next door employees, or there's,
Right, but I could take a license plate, look it up, and find out who owns it. No?
We can't do that, no.
No, you can't do that.
Only the police department can look up license plates. The
Bring out-
pla-
you
planning
bring out
code
the
enforcement
police.
can't do that. Code enforcement staff has no way to tell, who people are. The streets are for the public's use. We can't regulate who parks on the street and where they work, so it's a very difficult condition to enforce. City staff can't sit outside the Subaru dealership and watch people walking in and out and determine whether or not they work there or not. So it's a very, very difficult condition to enforce.
How does this improve it?
So this condition requires the applicant to have spaces marked for employee parking only. So they can go out and make sure that those spaces are available for employees, and they can make sure that there's no cars for sale parked in those spaces. So at least there's spaces available for an employee to park in. And that is a more enforceable condition than knowing whether or not an employee is parking.
I got a couple,
1 second.
there's,
Wait,
Wait, your turn.
okay,
Thank you.
still talking.
in terms of Mission Trail saying that doing it off of Stevens Creek, right, will pose a hazard, I didn't quite understand. Isn't that where it currently is being picked up? No?
So currently, Subaru dealership is having their trash wheeled to the future Lincoln side. And because Lincoln is allowed to get their trash picked up on their parcel, so Mission Trail is currently picking up the trash for both, I guess, Subaru and Lincoln. So, yeah, the applicant does own both sides, but
And so they've never picked up the trash off of Stevens Creek?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Done.
Okay,
All right.
your turn.
There's other businesses on Stevens Creek that have their trash picked up right on Stevens Creek, for your information. There is. Okay, so there's no way that they can say that cannot be done. Also, you said that they find it pretty hard for that to drive in the allow a driveway space for the truck to come in and pick up the garbage and then back out again. Correct? Is that what you mentioned? that they said?
That's correct,
Well,
Commissioner.
I hate to say this. My office is on Prune Ridge, and we had a very narrow driveway, and once a week, here comes a truck, pick up the dumpsters, dumps it, goes up, and backs up back into Prune Ridge again. So that is really not an issue right there. Also, you can tell the difference between a recycling oil recycling truck and a regular garbage truck. The one will have a complete enclosure and a hose. It depends on their facilities, if they have underground storage for the oil or the coolant that they have for recycling. So there is a big difference in the truck. So I find code enforcement not being able to see that. All you got to do is Google it and see a picture and the thing. Parking, the parking situation over there, if I recall, they has a time limit between no parking between 10 p.m. to 8 p.m. or something like, or 8 a.m.
Yes, streets, they put those signs recently.
Why can't we just have permit parking on both sides of the street and that would solve that problem?
Based on the purview of this request, that's something that I think that planning can
That's a process done through the Public Works Department. They did start a permit parking a process for that neighborhood. I don't know the exact status. The first go-around didn't pass. It needs a certain amount of votes in order to pass for permit parking. I know the first go-around didn't pass. I'm not exactly sure what the status of that permit parking program is currently.
Yeah, because they have it like on El Capitan, off of El
Yes,
Capitan,
but
and what is
yeah.
the other
It's a
side street.
program
So
offered through our
there-
Public Works
it can
Department.
be done. In other words, it's a
it can be
solution
done.
that we can try to enforce this. Because the only thing that I heard you say is encourage the employees to park. Encourage doesn't mean, yeah, you're going to have to park there. It says, oh,
Correct.
by the way, can you park in here?
Right,
No,
that's correct,
it doesn't.
Commissioner.
It doesn't solve anything.
Right, that's correct, Commissioner. I think I guess the purpose of that condition is to, at least for the planning side, to make sure it's more enforceable. I know how Leslie has mentioned Public Works is working on that. I guess parking permits process, and it's going through that. And that's been through, working in collaboration with the residents of that neighborhood. That's something like Leslie said, planning can't really involve ourselves, I guess, because that's a process they're, working on. So I think it's just trying to work on something that, solutions that planning can do to make things
The
better.
advantage of, so that both can work,
Correct.
They're neighbors. They should be able to resolve the problems. And the neighborhood, the homes were there before the dealer was there. Also, there's a Stevens Creek Nissan has the same situation, but they got a wall behind, McLean Drive
Right.
that backs up. Their backyard is right at, against the residential area too. But they have a wall there, and they used everything out of Stevens Creek or off Cronin. So I don't see any problem with them, so I don't know why they can't do the same thing at the Subaru and the Lincoln dealer.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think just to answer your first point, if I may, this, I guess the statement I mentioned about, I guess, trash not being, I guess, it came from Mission Trail. That's why I like to provide, they provided that statement to you, the commission, just so you guys can read exactly the verbiage that they mentioned. Because this is something that they're saying that they do prefer it from being CISO side, just because they do literally state on their statement that it's too dangerous for their trash to pick up trash. They're not saying it cannot be done. It's just saying that they think they don't want to create risk for their employees. Okay.
To drive their truck and back it up. And Prune Ridge is a busy street too. Right, Brian, right there on Prune Ridge and Winchester, that's a busy intersection. Right, so it's about the same. And actually, you got more leadway in Stevens Creek, and you have the same time, you have the truck drivers unloading the cars on Stevens Creek. I think that's more dangerous than picking up a garbage can. So I find that very hard to swallow. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Other comments?
Just following up on more regulatory, does the application currently meet the parking requirements for staff as well as the business operation itself, ratio-wise?
That's correct. I can share that number with the entire commission in 1 second.
Could you make that a condition of approval as well?
It was in the original entitlement, it was approved with that. Originally, I think let me get the exact number. It was on the attached staff report for the original.
Is the original different from the current parking standard? That's what I was trying to.
Currently, no, it doesn't change, but.
It didn't change for
on the
auto.
site plan, they do have a parking count, and they say in total they have over 300 and something spaces. But their parking is not changing.
So my clarification is because they're designating now for staff only, is there a ratio from employment to the operations? Like people purchase
Right,
the
right.
sale transaction.
So based on our zoning code, we don't have any provisions with exact, like breaking down the parking for employees versus, I guess, customers.
So do we know how many employees this business has right now?
That's something that unfortunately, I guess the applicant can answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to clarify the number of business employees and the designated parking stalls, and if it meets generally even a office standard, just as a benchmark.
Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
thank you. Two quick questions. You have stated twice that the request for these changes came from the waste collection agency, right? That they had some hazard issues and they wanted to change to collect from Cecil. Is that correct?
I guess just to clarify, the original request came from the applicant. We just wanted to get a statement from Mission Trail to get their
see.
point of view and if it was something they supported.
Okay.
That's why we ended up getting that
All
statement
right,
from them.
thank you for clarification. The second question is, you mentioned that most of the other properties around that area get their trash picked up from Cecil. So is it also in the trash collection agency's benefit to just one isolated incident that they can all be on the same side? That would be a good thing for all of us, but is that the reason why they want to collect from Cecil and not because they have to go around and do a special collection for this property from Stevens Creek?
Commissioner, that can be something that the applicant can answer, to just their intent. Alice?
Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough, thank you.
Why don't we, yeah, for the applicant-specific questions, we can wait for the applicant. I do have a question on wording for P19, removing the stipulation on the once a week for fluid collection. What I'm hearing is that it's difficult to administer, so we're just not going to try. Is that a fair interpretation?
Chair, I can answer that question. I can say code enforcement does try. It's false expectations for us to the neighborhood that we're going to be able to achieve what this condition says that we should be achieving.
I sympathize that it's difficult, but what I'm concerned with is if you remove the stipulation and the neighborhood did have a reportable incident of multiple times a week collection, we no longer have an authority to monitor. We have no longer got a fallback to be able to do anything about it. So leaving it in and not enforcing it is unfortunate, but less of a change than taking it out and not being able to enforce it, if you see what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So I prefer that we don't remove stipulations simply because they're difficult, because that removes all options.
We can leave it in.
Okay. I have a question to that. Sure, go ahead.
Stupid thing on. So to our lawyer, does that put some kind of burden on us because it stays in there and given that we can't enforce it? And I've got to be very careful I ask that question, so if you know where I'm going to. So you put it in there, then is there a reasonable expectation that it will be enforced, and does that cause any liability to us?
Cities have some general protections in terms of what our liability is. It does give us a mechanism to enforce, so without it, we don't have that mechanism. And in terms of the obligation to enforce, it doesn't necessarily require that the city enforce it as written.
So
Chair, if I may, I do have the answer to your parking question. Condition P9 has the parking requirements for this project, and that condition is not changing. So we'll just require that they be marked.
right. Good. Other commission questions before we? Okay, let's go ahead with the applicant at this point. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Zamora. I'm an architect representing Stevens Creek Subaru. So on behalf of Stevens Creek Subaru, I want to say a few words regarding these conditions. Basically, we had no issue with the conditions that were described earlier in this meeting. Subaru is committed to adhere to the conditions that was proposed, and I think we're not asking anything special other than by requiring to have a waste pickup on Cecil Avenue, because as stated earlier by planners, Alex Tellez, the trucks currently go through that street anyway once weekly, and they pick up waste from other tenants on the same side. So this is not, we're not asking any special condition other than be able to pick up trash at the designated location on the back of the building. And
Do you want your presentation up? Sorry to interrupt.
sure.
If we could share the council chamber screen again, please.
How do I switch the, oh, thanks. So since we wrote this, they added condition 13, which, like I said, is not an issue with us. We can willing to adhere to all these conditions and is it? No. Amen.
Okay, how about just swipe?
Swipe.
Is that okay?
Left or right,
Yeah.
or the up
Yeah,
now?
so just this, so just swipe
Okay.
left. Is that okay?
No problem. So like I said earlier, we are willing to accept all these conditions, and we don't have no problem with that. And we also have been talking to Mission Trail, and we had a meeting at the site where we discussed how the process to whether to move the bins inside, live inside or outside. And Mission Trail specifically mentioned that on the recent accident they had about a few months ago, they went inside a building and they hit, when they lifted the lift for pick up one of the bins, they hit one of the fire sprinklers, and it caused some major damages to the building. And so since then, they will no longer go into any building, especially when they have fire sprinklers, which this building has fire sprinklers. Even though the height is about 20-some feet, much higher than their truck can go, they refuse to go inside the building. So they said that they would only pick up outside in the curb or, same as the other places or the other businesses. So we did discuss that. And also they're concerned about anything if we had to pick up in the Stevens Creek is considered a dangerous situation. As a matter of fact, a few months ago, there was an accident, and because, as you know, Subaru has a lot of cars coming and being delivered in the morning for service, and sometimes they get backed up a little bit, and then one day, back in March, there was an accident, there was a motorcycle person that was killed close to the intersection, close to the entrance. So for that reason, I think it's not reasonable to expect to pick up along Stevens Creek. So I think that's not a good safe access point. On this slide, I'm showing up the site plan which shows the residential on the north side and the commercial on the south side. So they're proposing to have the waste pickup on the sliding gate. During the construction of this building, they it was included to have a 26-foot gate that slides, specifically made for this pickup only, for trash. It's not being used for any other purpose other than trash. And so basically, we can say that this gate and this also we show on the far right a main gate. The main gate will only be used for emergency egress and for life safety issues. And in discussions with Subaru, they're going to implement a strict policy that would prevent anybody from going in the back unless it's an emergency like a fire or life safety issue. So I know that was one of the issues that some of the neighbors were complaining about it. And I was there last few days ago when we put the sign, and I even noticed there was a chair. So I thought, remove the chair so nobody can put the door on the open position and leave it open. And we're going to put a sign that says emergency exit only. And regarding the parking, we had no issue, and we're going to be able to designate parking for employees on the inside. This building has 3 stories, by the way, not 2. So the top floors are for parking new cars and other cars and employees. So we have no issue making sure that the employees will park inside at the designated spaces. So I think overall, Subaru has a policy of a good neighbor. We're going to be good neighbors with all the neighbors' residential area. So we commit to adhere to these conditions, and we hope we can pass, the commission can pass this resolution. Any questions?
I'm a little confused. Which conditions do you want to keep? And which ones are you willing to forego as a good neighbor?
Well, the conditions, is explained by planner Tejas. The conditions that we're here for is to approve waste pickup on the back on Cecil, okay? That's the main.
That would be which condition?
That's condition.
I just want to make
6,
sure I
6.
understand.
Condition 6.
Okay, you want to keep that
P6.
one as recommended in the package, right?
Yeah, P6, yes.
And which other one do you want to keep as recommended in the package?
13, 19, and 20,
19 and 20?
and 8, yeah.
Okay, so you want 8, 19, and 20. Then I guess what I'm not clear on is, in terms of good neighbor, the only, well, which condition are you willing to forego? It doesn't sound like any of them.
What do you mean by forego?
Well,
We're,
this is what I'm trying to understand, because I appreciate when neighbors and businesses work together. And I thought I heard you say that you wanted to be a good neighbor, and that's why I'm asking the question, which of these conditions, because we're looking at a big package here that talks about, let's see, I think 6, how many? Okay, which one? I've got several forms. It's the separate one, okay. Well, that's where some of the confusion comes in. Okay. Yeah, we generally get a lot of documents, and some of them we don't get until day of, so forgive me a bit. I am now looking at the documents they're talking about. You want to keep 6? Yeah. Well, there's additions and edits, so 6, 8, 19, and 20, right?
And 13. Chair, if I may. Chair.
I'm looking at 3 different versions, so feel free to know.
Chair, so condition P6, we're adding a few words to that condition that will allow trash to be picked up. So that condition is in regards to the use of roll-up doors. And the words we're adding here will just allow someone to use those doors just to facilitate trash pickup. So that's the only change to condition P6. The change to condition P8, that's in regards to employee parking.
Right.
So that does not have to do with trash pickup. That's just in regards to employee parking.
Right.
Because we're reviewing these conditions, this is a condition that was difficult for code enforcement staff
No, I got
to
that one.
enforce. So again, you understood that one, okay. Condition P13, we're adding the words, now that's the use of the 26-foot wide driveway gate. We're adding the words trash recycling and pickup, and that's just so that they can roll out the trash and roll it back in on trash day. Otherwise, they don't use that gate. So just on trash day, they use that gate for trash pickup only. Otherwise, that gate doesn't get used. P19, that has trash recycling and pickup was prohibited. So we're going to cross that out, so it's no longer
Because
prohibited.
you're going to allow it. I understand that. I'm following you.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to hear from the applicant.
Okay, so I'm hoping he's hearing this too. So if there's
Okay.
anything, and then also as the chair said, in regards to the oil pickup, this is a difficult condition for us to enforce, but leaving it in is fine. Having it there so that we could enforce it if necessary. Staff is fine with leaving that condition in, removing the cross out and just leaving that as is okay.
Staff is fine. Is the applicant fine?
I'm fine.
Okay.
You explained it better.
Yeah.
So then the only part, so then there would be no changes other than on 19. So the only change would be crossing out trash and recycling pickup. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. And then when it comes to 13, the only change would be trash recycling pickup is added, right, sir? Okay. And then on 8, that's about the parking situation. And you're not willing to keep the original language for that? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, like I said, we are committed to do what needs to be done so that we don't have any issues with the parking. So as far as employees parking inside, we will.
No, I understand. I'm just asking the question so I can be clear about this. And that's why I'm wondering if that is such a big deal, or if you're willing to keep the language that was there.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it because it was changed at the last minute.
Okay, so you see the problem I have, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's kind of,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were in the same situation.
yes, that's why. And there was different versions, so sometimes I read one and say, oh,
Believe me, it's okay.
which one is the latest one?
One about parking. Originally, it said all employees shall be directed to park on site and no employee shall be permitted to park off site. That was the original language. And then the suggestion is that it should be changed to say employees should be directed to park on designated parking stalls on site. The designated parking stalls shall be signed by employee only, and they're strongly discouraged to park off site. In other words, would you be willing to keep the one sentence as was instead of adding the additions? Do you have the same document I have now? It's in red?
Okay, the one I'm seeing has a red crossed out in
Yeah.
blue. That's fine with us.
Okay, you can keep the original that just says, I'm not sure.
As it's marked.
We are saying keep the previous condition to make sure your employees park only within your site,
Right.
not the discouraged, encouraged
Right.
version of it. You are going to continue to
Yes.
require your employees to be on site.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Jerukuru. Okay, so that one can be keep. All right, go ahead.
I actually have a question at this point, too. So currently,
Excuse me,
I keep turning it off so that I
we're
wouldn't.
together, and Nathan, he wants to make it.
Yeah, my
All
name
right,
is,
go ahead.
oh, I just want to say, my name is Nathan Roxenbaum. I'm an assistant to Mr. Zamora. I guess I have to speak into the mic. We were asked by the Subaru dealership to help with with the trash issue, the trash pickup issue. Although we are clearly somewhat involved with the other changes in the conditions. But I think with the dealership itself, we're really only discussing primarily the trash issue like most of the time, and that's why they brought us into this project. So, we talk to them, and Mrs. Moore talks to them about these other points, but it's very hard for us to make any promises with the parking issue, for example, just because we're not employees of the dealership, we're not members of the dealership, we're just an outside team that were brought in for this one purpose.
Through the chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate, I wish then the dealership was here, but I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
And just to clarify from what your statement is, you do not know if Subaru will be okay with the correction to the other conditions?
I believe they trust Mr. Zamora's opinion on these issues quite a bit. So if he's here trying to represent the situation,
So we are going to require that the condition related to employee parking stay as the original use permit. Is that good?
yeah, I don't have.
I know you intervened to say you don't have any right. I'm going to say you shall have the right.
I'm sorry, I thought there was a question. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're mandating you to represent that opinion. So I do have a question on the trash pickup, which is pertinent to the conversation. Currently, does the truck proceed in and back out occur to pick up anything, or is there any reversal of the trucks currently to pick up the trash?
Do you mean at the Subaru property?
At the Subaru, to pick up the trash, at any point of the picking up of the trash, do they reverse the truck off the property
I believe they don't currently pick it up at all.
or onto it?
Currently, there's no pickup at all.
They have to, they don't pick up on
At
the
the Lincoln,
property.
they move it to the Lincoln,
They
which is
carry
the same
bins to
essence.
the next
same,
door,
Just a driveway.
Lincoln dealership.
Okay.
So, could have-
It is our understanding that the current conditional use permit doesn't allow any trash pickup at all, and that includes in the rear.
That's fine. That's clarification. Now, in the new reality of picking it up on the, yeah, in the new reality, is there any reversing of the truck?
No.
That's fine. That's good. That's just clarifying, because I don't think the neighborhood would appreciate, a minute or two of truck backing up with the motion alarm going off. So as long as there's no additional noise being generated by moving the trash pickup, then that makes it a mood issue. Thank you.
got a quick question.
Okay.
I got just a quick question, sir. So the owner of the dealership, you're not the owner of the dealership, what are you, a sales manager or?
He's a representative.
I'm representing Subaru as, on their behalf.
So you-
I was hired by Subaru as also as a construction administrator during the construction of the project. So I was very involved during the construction phase. So that's why they
Sure. Okay, so this is the part that I find it hard, because if we're making a deal here with the party, the owners of the Subaru and the Lincoln, the owner of the properties, we have the architect or the builder making the decision.
That's fine. That's perfectly acceptable, because what they commit to and what we vote for, it becomes the rule.
Yeah, but it can come back and bite.
No, it can't. They can challenge it to the council.
He went over the limit line or something and bring it back to us?
So Through the chair, if I may, my understanding is the applicant who is present tonight submitted the application and the owner signed an owner consent. So
you give 'em like the power
person
of
who's
attorney to do it.
present tonight is the applicant who has the authority to act on this
Okay, so he has the
application.
power of attorney to go ahead and make the decisions for them, in other words, similar to that.
Don't add more words. He has the
They're the applicant.
Acting ex authority, okay.
They're acting as the applicant.
Yes, I'm the
That
official,
clarified everything.
I'm the official applicant on the application, if you can.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. All right, is there any other questions for the applicant before we open to the public?
No, let's go to the public.
Okay, let's go ahead and open to the public. I assume there's going to be speakers.
Yes, anyone can speak, but we do have some speaker cards, so if you want to come up. I'll just going to read the names here. Tracy Johnson.
Maybe they want to concede their minutes.
Good evening, I'm Tracy Johnson. Well, I can't say president of the South of Forest Association officially anymore because we haven't had a board meeting probably or an election since COVID. But I've walked the streets for over 20 years, and so I've typically found out about these projects from posting on polls and have always been involved a lot. And I'm very, as hopefully you can tell from my writing, very interested in solutions that serve the community, and including the applicant. So I didn't find out about this project until Monday, the 12th. I knew nothing about it until Alex reached out to me on Steve Lee's recommendation. So I apologize. I'm the one causing all this chaos because I'm the one that submitted another letter this morning that was more detailed, that I was up all night last night writing for you to read. And I appreciate you so much investing the time to read it. So I'm pleased to hear that it looks like 114 parking spaces that have been designated for employee use based on the previous use permit, and that those will get labeled. And so that'll be more enforceable for the parking. I didn't know about that part. And there was just some faux pas on some of the language and defining the sliding iron gate that the dumpster will be traveling through to go out onto Cecil. That just needs to be clarified or maybe added in one section. And on the neighbors behind the dealership have put up with a lot. And so I appreciate you guys taking the time to dig into the details of this and make it work. Yes, Subaru has been using the dumpster enclosure at the old Subaru dealership, which is now becoming the new Lincoln dealership. And to Commissioner Booza's comment about accessing the truck into the Subaru dealership, it's like a giant bridge over that corridor. And the applicant did mention that the sprinkler got hit at one point, and I could see where that would legitimately happen. Just our concern with them doing the trash out on Cecil is that they won't be prompt about putting the dumpster out, bringing it back in, cleaning up extraneous trash that results on the street from, lifting a dumpster over the top of a truck. So that good neighbor
Is there anyone else that would
aspect.
like to cede you their time so that you can continue your
Thank you.
or not?
Huh?
I was asking if there was anyone else here that wanted to cede you their time so that
Oh.
you can finish your points. Just say, you know,
Guys, do you want to give me some of your time, or do you want to come up and speak? I'd really like it if the neighbors that live there speak.
Okay.
Huh?
okay, then you're done.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
We have Cliff Moore.
Given the limited time I have, I'm probably going to leave you more confused than how we started. So just to address a couple of points I want to make very clear. In Alex's presentation, one thing I want to establish to be very clear on the current pickup of the garbage on Cecil. So that's not entirely true. Not all businesses do that. For example, the Scuttlebug's located directly across from my house. They used to have a dumpster on Cecil. They no longer do that. They have the big trash containers on this side, and they access that from Henry. Not to mention, when they do go down the street, they come from Henry. They don't come down Cecil. So they come from Henry, they come down Cecil. The first dumpster is located about 60 feet inside of that property. So you never see a garbage truck on Cecil. They enter into the property about 60 feet where they make the dump and then they back out. The other important note to clarify here is all the access to those dumpsters is from the Stevens Creek side. I'm sorry. At no time do the businesses access those dumpsters from the Cecil side ever. Subaru is the only one that does that, in violation of their use permit today. If you look at their current track record of violations, Leslie is well aware of these. And in fact, I have a letter from Leslie that actually conflicts with what they're saying Mission Trail says. Mission Trail says they will pick up there, and they say it's not a safety issue if there's a curb to mark red in the front of their property. They acknowledge that, it's in the letter, and it's a response from Leslie's letter. It's there. So they can do it. It's a matter of convenience. So, like I said, they don't pick up on Cecil at every business. They do on 2 of them, and they access everything, the businesses on the Stevens Creek side, not the Cecil side.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Jennifer Johnson. Oh, that might have been the person who was our public presentation. Mark Irving.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mark Irving, 3267 Cecil Avenue. Last time I was in front of you was for the Lincoln dealership permit to start building permit. At the time, I said I am totally open to improvement and progress within Cecil and Stevens Creek, as long as the status quo in Cecil does not change. This is a direct change on Cecil Avenue. We approved the Lincoln pickup as it was grandfathered in. We were okay with that on trash pickup. Now we're saying we want to add additional trucks. It doesn't happen once a week. It happens 3 times a week. It does not, we are not only looking at trucks that run down Cecil. We are looking at car pickups. We are looking at deliveries. Most of the Cecil trash bins are picked up in their parking lot and not on the street. In fact, Lincoln is the only one that will be allowed to do that. And the policies and policing of the policies by the Subaru dealership is poor at most, at best. That design location that they wish to push the trash can was designed for fire trucks to come through. It's not permitted to open unless an emergency, along with the walkway. They have no indication that those doors open. There's no alarm goes off. There's no policy forced. Those things open consistently, including the roll-up doors. If you allow this to happen, they will again do the same thing. They will leave trash in the backyard. They will make the sidewalk dirty. They won't pick up anything, and all we'll do is put more stress on the neighbors. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the chambers who would like to speak? We do have one person online.
Perry, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm Perry He. I'm on 3151 Cecil Avenue. I just want to point out the 2 things. Number 1, my wife and I walk on Cecil every day, twice a day normally. Now, only recently, I noticed that the Subaru employees opened the back door and rolling the trash out and then put into that construction site. Now it's a Lincoln dealership put in the trash can. But in the past, Subaru dealer has been there for a pretty long time and never see that happen. So only very recently, I do not know why. Maybe they want to create a case that they couldn't pick up from Stevens Creek. Now they want to use the Cecil Avenue instead. So I just want to point out, I only noticed that very recently in the last few months. So secondly, for parking, now, long time ago, a lot of Subaru employees park along Cecil Avenue. on the north side. And then they're not only create a parking problem, but also left a lot of trash after they left. And could be lunchbox, could be bottles, cans, everything. So allowing people parking there for Subaru dealer employees could be a potential problem for us. I just want to point out two things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other speaker? Now's your
No, we
chance.
do not have any other speakers.
Okay.
No?
All right.
I got a couple things that kind of clear it up.
Well, we should close public hearing first, and then we.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course, there is rebuttal. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Rebuttal by the applicant for any of the comments made? Yes, go ahead. You have your normal time to rebut.
Someone made a statement that the trash pickup truck it picks up from some of the commercial business. And the only reason is because in those businesses adjacent to Subaru have open, there's no building above. It's just an open parking lot. Of course, you can drive in. It's easy. There's nothing obstructing you. When you have no buildings, you can drive through. You can make a turn. In this case of Subaru, it's not possible. And like I said, when we had a field discussion at the site with Mission Trail, they specifically say that they will not, their insurance or will not let them go through a building anymore because of the fire sprinklers could be a potential hazard. So they will not pick up at all. Okay?
Good.
And also, how do the person who mentioned about people parking on the street being Subaru employees, how does he know? Does he ask questions? Does he prove that the employees? It's hard to tell, right?
Yeah.
I was there last week too, and I see some car parked there, but I was about to ask him, are you Subaru employee? Are you, but you know, it's hard to tell if the person who is parked in the street is a Subaru or could be homeless. I saw some trash. They look like a homeless left behind. So can you blame Subaru employees as being homeless? I don't know. It seems kind of hard to believe.
Okay. Well, we'll have questions, so don't go too far.
Okay, thank you. A couple of points that I want to bring up. Oh, for instance, one of the things you said, sir, is how can you tell they're Subaru employees? Well, the neighbors that you probably hear, they probably have cameras in their homes like most of the people do, and they can see when the cars are coming in for. And also at the same time, most of the mechanics or so on will have their uniforms. They'll wear uniforms. So you could tell, you know, it isn't like they're working at Shakey's Pizza or a Round Table. You can tell they probably work for that. But anyway, one of the things that brought to my attention is what I believe Cliff mentioned, that other facilities, they're coming in from Stevens Creek, and that's one of the things that I mentioned before, that I knew that they were, you know, that they had a trash pickup through Stevens Creek. So that's not going to be a problem that way. One of the things that you mentioned is the overhang that they won't come in. You could do is in the mornings or the night before, just have your employees push it past that so they won't have to drive all the way back to where the overhang is, pick it up, and the first employer gets there at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, put it back and put it away. That's a lot of businesses do that. You know, you're talking to a business owner. You know, some of the things that we have to do, and also clean up after I can see their point. Once it goes over, it gets into a mess. That's one of the things. So one of the things to mention is 3 times a week. That's quite a bit. One of my concerns would be the recycling, which is the oil, that in itself could be
Through the chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I may, are we opening the public hearing? Or are you still asking clarifying questions?
We never close public.
Are you closing public comment?
No.
No, we haven't.
No.
It's still in the rebuttal.
Just bear with me. Thank you. So anyway, let's just make one thing clear here. I don't see any problem doing it the way that they first agree with it. Is there a driveway that Lincoln and the Subaru dealer share, because it's the same ownership? There's no That they will be sharing a space in between, or there's going to be a wall, or is going to be an entrance that both can share? That's to the
Well, right now, I haven't seen the plans for the new buildings. You're talking about the Lincoln building?
the Lincoln and the Subaru. Are they going to have like a, like instead of have a wall, they're going to have like a space between that they could
No, they're
drive,
gonna-
and then one goes this way and the other one goes the other way.
There are two separate parcels, two separate buildings completely.
But they're not going to have an easement that they both can share going, like a driveway.
To my knowledge, they're not.
They're going
gonna
to not
use-
do that.
gonna be
Okay.
separate.
Well, one of the things I wish that they are very successful, and maybe in the future, they can take their service department and move it to the industrial part of the city like Lexus does and like Audi does, and a lot of the other dealerships do too. So that way they, yeah. Get more
Are there
price,
other
more space.
questions for applicant?
Just to clarify, the last public member said that this hasn't been the practice, that Cecil Avenue was used. So what changed? I mean, Subaru's been there forever, and Mission Trail has been picking it up.
Right.
So why now? Why now the change to Cecil Avenue, or even started without permits?
You mean change from what?
It's been picked up, at least it should have been picked up from Stevens Creek. So the member who resides in the residential neighborhood just confirmed that Subaru did not do this in the past, and it's a recent activity of having trash picked up from Cecil Avenue. Why this changed?
Well, for one, Mission Trail will not pick up on Stevens Creek at this location, okay? They refuse to pick up. And
Is that true, Steph? Like, do we have that as writing, that they will not pick up?
That's what it says on the letter from Mission Trail.
That they will not pick up? And is that going to be the case for Lincoln and other properties as well?
Yeah, so Lincoln, it's allowed to get picked up from Cecil.
Oh, from Cecil, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, helpful, thank you. Okay, so Mission Trail is the one that is basically saying they
Are
won't.
you saying the Mission Trail's not picking up on Stevens Creek? I mean, are you putting that in writing?
That's what they're saying.
That's what others,
Because they are doing it.
So, Chair, please read the last page. It is the letter from Mission Trail, and it does not say that they will not pick it up. It says we'd like to pick it up from Cecil Avenue.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
and it's
Chair, if I
complete,
may.
one thing is one yes and the other is no. So let's not get, no is no and maybe, and maybe I don't want to.
Correct. Chair, if I may. Mission Trails would prefer to pick it up on Cecil. There are conditions in which they will pick it up from Stevens Creek, as the member of the public mentioned. If we stripe a very large red curb along the frontage of Stevens Creek Subaru. There are reasons why Stevens Creek Subaru very obviously would not wish to do that, as that is customer parking. But yes.
They have a red stripe right now.
They have a very small red stripe.
Okay,
Yes.
I see. Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
But yes, Mission Trails, as it says in the correspondence you received, they would prefer to pick up from Cecil Avenue. And as you rightly mentioned, they do pick up on Stevens Creek. If they had the choice, they would not pick up from Stevens Creek, but there are existing conditions for which they cannot change.
So if I may, through the chair, ask the applicant. So basically, the request from Mission Trail is now for you to have a larger red strip, thereby probably impacting 1 to 2 of your customer parking.
I believe that was one of the two options. One was for trash pickup. Yeah, one was on. One was on Cecil Avenue, and the other one was to enlarge the red stripe on the frontage on Stevens Creek. But they're not our customers. We're just representing again the firm. Yeah.
Wait, no, so, sorry for being technical here, and bear with the clarification. How long should the strip be? What's your distance for your Mission Trail? parking, maybe staff? Like, what are we talking?
3 car lengths.
3 car lengths? Because they have to pull in?
Yes, I would say that's about right, yeah. It's to accommodate not only the dumpster, but the truck, length of the truck also pulling in.
Okay. Okay. And then to follow up, is Lincoln also under Subaru? Is the property shared ownership between Lincoln and Subaru?
No, they're two separate parcels.
Parcels aside, I'm asking, the building, by the way, just so you know, already is built over the property line. So it's a moot point. So my question is Lincoln and Subaru under the same ownership?
Yes.
Well,
okay.
I looked at the registrar, not the registrar, in the county who owns the parcels, and I believe the parcels are technically owned by separate entities, but the Lincoln parcel is owned by the Subaru.
Okay.
Yeah, so the different
You know
names
that the building is built over the property line, just for context, go look it up. What I'm trying to get to is, can they not have an easement through that street that's just adjoining Lincoln? So I'm on the Google map, and just adjacent to Lincoln is a little alley, I would say service alley, that supports just Lincoln. Am I seeing this Google map?
Can you post it?
Yeah, no, this is Cecil, I'm saying, sorry. Here. See this by Lincoln? This little.
So there's an approved project. That building's going to be partially demolished, and a whole new building will be there right up against the property line, so that won't exist
Good
anymore.
opportunity to get an easement.
That's already approved, and building permits are under
I
review,
see.
so that ship has sailed.
So is that little streetway going away?
Yes.
So it's going to be built more?
Yes, that part of the building will be gone.
Okay.
It'll be fully built out with a new building.
Okay, and so Lincoln has an approval to have its trash picked up from
Cecil.
Can Subaru not use the same approval? Why do they need a second one is what I'm asking.
Subaru needs trash pickup from their own property. They're 2 separate properties. They need to have their own trash pickup.
Are they not already like subsumed into one property, just built over property lines?
They're not built over the property line. They're built on the property line, but they still need to have their own trash pickup for each separate
business.
Yes.
Okay.
Business hands could change, parcels could change. They need to have their own trash pickup.
I see. Okay. Helpful. Fair enough. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we close?
Just one quick question. So,
Of course, there's another. Go for it.
Oh, there's Yash.
quick question. Yeah.
There's both ends are asked.
Go first. Go first, please.
Yeah. So, right now, the trash pickup truck running on the Cecil road. So, right now, the Mission Trail, the pickup truck, yeah, they go through that Cecil. So you just add one stop. Yeah, same truck, same road, just one more stop. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So I'll just make a comment. The extent of confusion that exists in the minds, certainly for me, I'm going to say it out just loud. I will not approve any changes. Thank you.
So we need to close public hearing first?
Yes.
Comment. Public.
Okay, who would like to?
I move to close public comment.
Second.
The motion is to close public hearing. Please go ahead and cast your vote. Thank you, and the motion passed. Thank you.
All right, Final rounds of comments from commissioners? Anything?
And Huang.
This was a bit confusing, but I thank you for your comments. And I also, you're Tracy? Okay. Of all the collection of paperwork that I read and listening to the comments tonight, I would like to thank you, Tracy, for being, I really liked reading your write-up, and I understand sometimes things wait till the last minute. I really do. That's our challenge up here, but we take it seriously. I thought your explanation was very compelling and explanatory in a way that leads me to the conclusion that I have right now, which is considering that there is yes, no, maybe so, and facts didn't necessarily match up. As I see it right now, I think condition 20 is a good one, and all that does is change the AM time from 6 to 7. But as for the rest of the conditions, I can't support them, not based on what I've read, what I've seen, and knowing the area. So the only one would be P20. The rest, my sense is we keep as is. Thank you.
Chair?
Others?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The reason I ask why the trash pickup truck goes through that street or not is if we just add one more stop. Actually, I think this project, the key is they just try to add a trash pickup stop. For others, parking, whatever, I think it's a minor. Personally, I support Subaru's request. Yeah, I see the gentleman. Yeah, I mean, my feeling is this: if it's only at the one stop, I think it's really more efficient for Mission Trail. And it's just a few minutes. It's yeah. I hear that. Thank you. So, if we can let Subaru do this, can we add condition? They clean up everything.
Let's
Yeah,
avoid a
so-
interactive discussion.
It's okay. Yeah. So, I mean, if Subaru, right, they can clean up. If they violate the condition, I think city, it's easy for city to enforce the code. So I support Subaru's request. I think it really makes sense. Another thing is the big truck stop on Stevens Creek. Stevens Creek, it's a busy street. Cars go fast. It's, not safe. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, so the only comment I have, which is kind of a unfortunate observation, is that if the Lincoln and the Subaru have separate trash pickups, that does not mean they need separate turnouts for the trash truck. They could put the two trash bins adjacent to each other on Stevens Creek and create a single 3-car turnout, a 3 parking space turnout that covers both cans or both bins. So I think what it all boils down to at this point is that Subaru is seeking to avoid losing customer parking in favor of changing the trash pickup. So I'm not supportive of the change simply to avoid a customer impact. Thank you.
Since we are anyway in comment and we are almost going into a recommendation, I truly struggled with this. I didn't think it was going to be this deliberative in my mind. I do recognize the safety issue when we have a big truck in the middle of Stevens Creek. Stevens Creek is a growing traffic area. So I see the accident being cause for concern. Mission Trail basically saying, they throw their hands up and saying, we're not doing this because of some faulty driving or the lack of clear ability to park. I also recognize that trash is being regularly picked up from a residential neighborhood, and that's normal. It's part of life, so I understand the recommendation from staff. I hear the residents' concern that Subaru has been a bad neighbor, pretty much, and not kept their neighborhood clean. And that is a rectifiable issue, making a mandatory condition. But I'll just say my comment, I haven't made my decision yet, but I see the value in both recommendation and concerns that were raised today. I'll wait until I can vote.
Others? Looking for a motion then?
Yep. We have a motion?
I have a question for the attorney. In the event, okay, after our CEQA study session, we could approve the first recommendation whether or not we like the second recommendation, right?
That's correct. Just to clarify, though, the item on CEQA here, it's a categorical exemption. It's very different than an environmental impact report.
I understand that, but it's like we could do that regardless of how we feel about the second.
Yes, you could take that action on that item.
Second question, if we like one of the conditions but not the others, is that something that would require two motions? One to approve condition X and then one to say deny the request for A, B, and C?
It would be
kind of a recommendation.
It would be the motion could be something that approves the modifications to the conditions of approval in whatever way you want to approve them. I would recommend two things, though. One, the intent of this application is to change the location of the waste and recycling collection. So to the extent the recommendation is outside of that scope, I would recommend reopening the public comment, giving the applicant an opportunity to speak on it as well.
Makes sense. So I have a motion. You ready? Yes, I do. Motion to approve the determination that the request is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, per CEQA guidelines, section 15305, class 5, minor alterations in land use limitations.
Second.
The motion was made by Commissioner Biagini, seconded by Commissioner Cherukuru to approve staff recommendation 1. Go ahead and record your vote, please.
No, you're not. You need to sit there.
Commissioner Bhatnagar, we're waiting for your vote.
So the motion reads differently from what Commissioner...
Staff recommendation 1, if you look on the agenda report, it's exactly what Commissioner Biagini just read. Determined the request is exempt from CEQA.
Okay.
So that's what staff recommendation 1 is.
Right.
It's on the RTC, report to council. Thank you, and the motion passed.
Shall I go with the second motion? Unless, okay. I would like to recommend that we deny a resolution approving a conditional use permit to modify existing conditions of approval on P6, P8, P19, and P20, so forth and so on, the rest of that. But basically, not to approve the conditional use.
Through the chair, if I may just make one consideration on your motion. There is not a resolution prepared for denial tonight, and so consider modifying your motion to bring back a resolution of intent to deny on consent at the next meeting.
That would work, because we usually ask Abby to take care of that for us. But yeah, no, that would, what she said.
Okay, so that's the motion.
Second?
So we have a motion on the floor, but no second, is that correct?
That was the motion. I seconded it.
Yeah, it
I
was.
did not hear you, so thank you.
Right.
Just on consent,
Are we
the
going to
decision is
say,
made.
are we giving the date that it's coming back?
New,
So it would just be a consent item, and yes, if you want to give a date, you
in other words, the reasons for.
Won't be open
Okay,
for public.
then, question to the attorney?
Yeah, the action is being taken tonight, the vote is being taken tonight. All that's coming back on consent is a resolution identifying all the findings that were made tonight and the denial that was made tonight. Just an opportunity for staff to put
The
in writing
reasons for
everything that was
denying, yeah.
taken tonight in action.
Thank you.
To note that the appeal period begins after the resolution recommendation.
That is correct. So the 7-day appeal period begins after the resolution is formally approved at the next meeting.
Got it.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor.
Because you have to have
No, already second. You're late.
We have a motion by Commissioner Biagini, seconded by Commissioner Buza, to bring back a resolution to deny basically the conditions and staff recommendation to.
It says adopt, is that just a misprint?
So I
don't see-
believe
I
what
don't
I
know where
heard,
you
just for
see it.
clarification, the motion is to deny and bring back a resolution of denial on consent at the next planning commission meeting. Is that a fair representation of
You're
your motion?
hired.
Go ahead and cast your vote, please.
Yes.
To bring it back.
The motion passed. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Those are all the motions. We're moving on to the next item.
Okay. Make it 8:30.
Two more things, no? We have one more thing, let's go. Okay,
Yeah, confirmation of
go ahead.
planning commission.
Yeah. Quick, 5 minutes.
I can live with the 5 minute.
Okay, we're going to go into a 5-minute recess. Thank you.
Sorry. Run a 6-minute break. 6 minutes.
Look at, I knocked it off in 5 minutes.
6 minutes.
Oh, we still get out of,
Okay, thank you.
We're on item 4, confirmation of Planning Commission work plan for fiscal year 2025 and 2026. I assume there's something we need to see. There we go.
Yes. Well, okay, so the work plan was attached to your staff report. It was basically the same as you've seen before. I did add some web links for the trainings that were mentioned, but this may be the last time that you all get to see it together. I'm not sure. The clerk's office has said that your presentation will be before the council either in June or July. I have not gotten your invitation yet, so I don't know if it'll be before your next meeting or not.
So will you send it to her? Sorry. So will you send it to the chair?
So I've made a draft presentation that I'll be sending to the chair.
Okay.
So it's what you've already seen before, but you can talk about it tonight. I'll send it to the chair and you can vote to give the chair authority to modify it.
So we'll be seeing item number 10 on July 20th.
Yeah, I don't know. This is just a placeholder for when your item will go before the council.
I was just reading it as Roman numerals. Oh, okay.
All right. So again, this is just to remind the city council that the planning commission is a quasi-judicial body, that you don't technically need a work plan because your work is to do the work that's identified in our zoning code and our general plan, but that there are things that you can do, such as relevant trainings, conferences and study sessions, but that you also do have a list of land use priorities for the council to consider during their priority setting process. And then I have your list, sorry, this bar is in my way, of conferences and trainings that you've attended in the past. And I've added web links for your use or for anyone else's use, should you want to go to the website, and some prices that have been published thus far. Maybe go next.
Okay.
Maybe. What's going on? Here we go. Study sessions. So these are the ones we've already done this year. You just had your CEQA presentation this evening. We had data centers last night. Xander will be doing due process in August. And then you do still have an outstanding one on infrastructure, planning, growth. You got a little bit last night from water and SVP, but also maybe we can get a little more out of them. I think I also had another one, but maybe VTA planning. I've heard that one before, so maybe we get VTA to come as well about their future transit planning in the area.
Santa Clara, where are we?
Where are we? I know, yeah.
Go ride the buses.
Yeah. And then finally, your land use priorities for the council to consider during their priority setting. And that's all I have for you.
I actually had something come up during the meeting today that spurred a possible training or a possible study session on, I'll open it for the commission to comment on, but how about a study session on code enforcement and our rights and our obligations as a commission to stipulate items that can be code enforced versus challenged? Because we don't really want to put requirements onto an approval that are beyond the rational or reasonable limits of the city to be able to enforce. So I think I really have been here this long and never heard of what the consequences are for breaking the stipulations that we've put on our previous approvals.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Yeah. We can do something around that.
If anybody wants to add or delete from that, please feel free to.
I have a question for staff.
Sure.
Would it make any sense to have a study session from staff about things that are challenges for you or problems that we can make life easier for you.
Gosh, I don't know.
Is there any, I do want to make her a little
Yeah, I
better.
don't know. Gosh, that's, you
Yeah,
know.
I know you.
I don't think we need a study session. I can tell you one item would be, if you have any questions on any item prior to the hearing, sending me emails of what those questions may be so that we could be prepared to answer them ahead of time, especially if they require some research. Yeah.
Get it.
Sometimes that's hard when you get a large document.
Yes.
And I have seen
Correct.
times when I looked at it and said,
I
I
know.
probably could have sent staff a question about that beforehand.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And it is our goal to get you packets earlier than we do, and we've had a really hard time lately achieving getting them sooner than the Friday. But do know that we would prefer to get them to you at least a week ahead of time. And we do still strive to get that, but.
Chair,
Crack the whip,
sorry,
Leslie.
go ahead, please.
One other tidbit that I'm sure Elizabeth and others would appreciate, a coordinated effort to lock in the meeting times and notifications and RSVPs so that we don't generate confusion, because I think we recently had a major confusion over yesterday's start times, and at least I did. I can't speak for the others, but these are things that would be super helpful if we could just have one point of contact in there.
I would agree with you.
Possible.
Hear, hear.
Okay. It's not a general complaint, it's just a
No, absolutely heard, yes, agreed.
If I may, so in the council priorities, I also wanted to ask, does the capital improvement plan come to Planning Commission as a recommendation to City Council? The infrastructure, isn't that required from a general plan?
I
CIP.
do believe it does, and that is every 2 years.
We do CIP every 2 years, not annually?
I think it's every 2 years, every other year. I think it's every other year.
Yeah, I didn't see one this year, that's why I was
Yeah,
asking.
because this is our operating budget this year.
I see, okay.
So it'll be next year. Yes, it does. General plan conformance, correct.
Okay,
It
yes.
does, yes.
I lost that term. So it'll be good to get like a little orientation on our CIP efforts before, or it could come as part of a study session as well. But it is a formal action if we are taking the general plan conformance.
One other thing, Leslie and staff, that I think we've been talking about or asking, but I don't know that we have done much about it. The RENA plan that was submitted to the state, the 8-year plan, now is a year in function, right? After it was approved and so forth. So basically, I'm just asking if there's just a little table, just one slide, one table that says, these were our commitments, and 1 year later, here we are. Approved or constructed, right? 2 separate columns, approved, constructed. That's all.
Okay. I made that announcement, not at the last meeting, I think it was the meeting before, but I can make a slide for you for the next time.
Aren't we required to submit annually anyway to RENA?
We do,
Yeah,
yes.
There you go.
Yes.
So you're just going to
I'll
send
put
the same
that-
thing to us?
Yes, I can put that on a slide for you, and I can also send you the report as well, but yes.
Thank you.
And do we know when our noticing requirements are going to come from a zoning code standpoint amendment? Are we done? I thought we were looking at 1,000 feet, 500 feet.
The public outreach policy?
Public outreach policy.
Yes. So staff is still doing research on the recommendations. We are looking into cost and logistics of mailing out number of notices. We're looking to bring that to council at one of their July meetings.
Okay.
So I will keep you updated on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are kind of blurring the lines on the next.
We are, you're right, sorry.
Announcements of other items.
Oh, I do want to
okay, yeah,
comment.
sorry. Are there any
Thank
other-
you very much, staff, for a very comprehensive effort for the data center study session. It was, there was a lot of hard work and a lot of, I would say, piqued interest in the topics. My only request, and again in the white paper, and I think Commissioner Crutchlow also alluded, as well as some of our other commissioners, what is the next steps? we had sent some questions ahead, and
Yes.
just making sure that those questions translate. I could resend it, but I didn't want to repeat because I knew the bandwidth was out yesterday, so I didn't want to go there.
We do have all those questions.
It'll be helpful just to counter the questions, narrative, FAQs, simple in your white paper, address itself, or a separate, it doesn't matter. We just felt like the questions that we had requested over almost 6 months of our data center topic request, it came as a very different
Format, yeah. I
format
understand,
and intent.
Yeah. I understand what you're getting, yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
But before you move on, Chair, is there, I'll send this to you, and if you all could take an action to, or I'll let the
Through the chair, just
attorney.
before we take any action, opening public comment.
On this work plan?
Yes.
Yes, every item on the agenda.
Through the chair.
Okay, well, let's open public comment then.
You're opening
Ready?
public comment. We do not have any speakers online or in the chambers.
I move to close public comment.
Second.
I think it doesn't, I don't, it's done. Yeah. It's okay, it's just closed. By consensus. Unless somebody wants to leave it open, any, no?
Go ahead and cast your vote, please, to close public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed.
And now, do we need to adopt this or recommend this to City Council? How does the second motion? This was just public comment.
It says there's no staff recommendation.
I thought we make a motion to allow the chair.
That is a motion you could absolutely make if you're interested
Make
in
a
it.
motion to allow the chair to
Present this to council.
the city council
With any changes as needed?
with any changes as needed.
Second.
Okay, the motion was made by, please
Eric
tell me.
Crutchlow.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Crutchlow.
Seconded by,
Commissioner Biagini.
thank you. Go ahead and cast your vote, please.
Yes.
So I'm going to
Very
ask
good, and the motion passed.
a
Thank you.
question that may be a lawyer question. Is there any reason to not send this to everyone on the commission? No, because this is recorded as a public statement within the VOD, the video on demand, that anyone can go and read off the screen. So I see no
We can get the
practical
copy.
purpose
The slideshow?
Yeah, this
Oh,
one.
yeah, it'll be post-meeting material. Yes.
So just send it to everybody instead of just me?
Through the chair, if I may, I believe this is going to be posted publicly, so everyone will have access to it, including the public.
That's fine,
I will send you the digital copy.
thank you.
The motion was really for you to present and make changes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. I can do that. Just relax. Commissioner Travel Planning, Commissioner Travel and Training Reports, request to attend trainings. Any?
We do have an item,
Okay.
and each of you were given information about the upcoming conference, the California APA Conference. And we put it on the agenda so a vote could be taken. The early registration is June. We talked about this at the last meeting about expending funds from this year's budget, so now's the time to take a vote. Yeah, it's in your agenda packet. All the information is there. It is APA California Conference in Monterey, September 28th through October 1st. The registration, early registration is $682. And I cannot give you a definitive on the cost per person because we don't have the information on their conference site yet. But if you had 4 nights at a hotel, plus the 3 to 4 nights and the registration, it could be, just a guess, it could be anywhere from, $1,400 on the high end per person to possibly lower.
I just want to thank City Council again for allowing us to participate. I did participate in the National APA Virtual Conference, so thank you again, Elizabeth, for allowing the reservation and registration to happen in a timely way. As virtual conferences go, it was okay. I got my AICP credits.
Okay, so did we have a vote on that? Do we need a vote on that?
On what, on Priya's attendance?
No, the previous item.
The one we
Unless
just
you're
spoke about?
nominating people.
Yes, that's why we have it on the agenda, because if anyone would like to attend, we need to vote to expend the funds, and we'll need to
we
do
get
this
an
as soon
idea
as
who wants
registration
to attend
opens in
now?
early June.
Show of hands, show of something.
Dates again, Elizabeth? September?
It is September 28th through October 1st.
So send email to you if I interested. Oh,
Well, I think what the best thing to do is anyone saying they definitely want to attend, or you just want to take a tentative right now? Because if we take our vote to expend funds, then we can go ahead and register people when the registration opens.
okay.
And if you do it now, it goes into the current budget.
Correct.
Otherwise, it'll
That
go
was the
into the
whole
next
idea.
fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Wait a minute, no,
So-
that's not
Yep.
moving on,
No,
it's,
no, we need to move on to the vote. And get
okay.
So we need to make a motion to,
How many commissioners are interested, at least tentatively?
Why don't you just raise your hand
Yeah.
so we can see?
So we have up to 3.
One, okay,
No,
so
that's
let's,
what I'm saying, only 3.
Only three who? 1, 2?
so we have,
Boozer.
we have Commissioner Wang, we have Commissioner Wang, Crutchlow, who else? So that's it, we have 2 that are interested?
yeah.
Okay, very good.
So here's a motion to recommend allocation for the APA California for 2 commissioners, for up to 2 commissioners?
Who seconded the motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Biagini abstain?
She had to go, she's not feeling well.
Yeah, we should announce Commissioner Biagini has left the meeting.
Okay.
Go ahead and cast your vote, please.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion passed. Thanks.
Planning Commission budget updates.
Okay, let's see. This month, we did renew the APA membership, which is fiscal year. We did renew the Business Journal subscription. Everyone has access to that online. Your current budget is at a balance of approximately $8,700.
Did you manage to get the correct passwords to everyone for SVB? Jay?
Did I not send an email to everyone about that?
You sent them to me, I remember.
I think I
and
sent an email
found the
to everyone
password
after.
that
If I didn't, I'll double check. But it did say that everyone now can set their own password. It used to be, don't ask me why, we all had to have the same password. So if anyone has any questions, contact me, but I'm pretty sure I sent an email out to everyone about that.
Making sure, thank you. The access to the Silicon Valley Business Journal requires a password. It was obscured. I didn't have it recorded, and I found it. So others may have a difficult time finding their password. Suggest trying to access it. Okay, thank you. Upcoming agenda items.
All right, your next meeting is June 11th. We have 2 rezonings on the agenda for townhome projects, and then we will have the related Santa Clara project on the agenda. This is a project to add a land use scheme. This is an alternative land use for parcels 1 and 2 within the project to allow light industrial uses and transfer the office uses on those 2 parcels to parcel 4. The city council had a study session on this item on May 6th. So if you want to get ahead, you can watch that study session on the city's website.
I saw this.
You already did. So Commissioner Chiricahua is already ahead of the game.
Okay, thank you. City council actions?
So since your last meeting, the city council had a meeting on April 26th where they approved the general plan amendment to modify our housing site inventory in the housing element to replace one of the housing sites. They approved this, as did the Planning Commission recommend approval. They also approved a general plan amendment to include the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation program into the city's safety element, which the Planning Commission did also recommend approval of. Those are all the items to report.
Adjournment? Any?
Move to adjourn?
Second. Any objections, consent? Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion has adjourned.
We're adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.